you know.
Oh, okay. Representative Washit has returned.
Mr. Chairman, we're live. Go ahead.
Thank you. All right, well, folks, welcome to the Judiciary Committee meeting, a first virtual committee meeting of this Judiciary Committee for 2021. And we will we'll get kicked off here with some opening remarks. And for those tuning in to check us out on YouTube, we'll after we take roll here, we'll start with some opening remarks, and then we'll get to the business of the committee. So Ryan, if you would please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Crago.
Present.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Oakley.
Here.
Representative Provenza.
Here.
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Present.
Representative Washit.
I'm here.
Representative Yin.
Here.
Representative Zwanitzer.
Here.
Chairman Olson.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ryan. So folks, for those tuning in, this is a pretty exciting moment for the Judiciary Committee. I would be remiss if I didn't start by congratulating all of the new members, Representative Crago, Representative Rodriguez Williams, Representative Provenza, Representative Oakley. You are all new, duly elected representatives, and you're new to the Judiciary Committee, although many of us are new to this committee. This is your first committee, so welcome to the House of Representatives and to the Judiciary Committee. The #1 committee, by the way. #1 on the roll and #1 in our hearts, I believe is how it goes. All right. So with that, for those of you out there tuning in to the committee, this is a little bit of a different format, and this is also for our members. So I do want to touch base on just a few things because we are on the Zoom platform, but the legislature has also changed its platform from traditional Zoom to Zoom webinar. So if you're a representative and you're getting going on this for the first time, or you are a member of the public, this may be a little bit different than what you're used to. So we have the way this is set up is we have panelists and attendees. We representatives, you're all panelists, and you could see that if you looked at the participants bar, you could see who are the panelists in here. That's us, and that's our LSO staff. Then there's an attendees tab, and those are the agencies and the members of the public, et cetera, who want to participate in our meetings. So they're going to provide testimony on bills as we move through. What makes it a little bit different in webinar is that we have the ability to move those attendees in and out into the panelist box, in and out. So when we're ready for the public, if you're listening public and you want to testify, I'll call out your name, letting you know that we're getting ready to bring you in, so you can make sure your screen and everything's ready to go. And then either I or a member of our staff will make sure that we get you into the panelist section. And then, of course, once we've finished taking testimony from you, we'll shepherd you right on out of the panelist section, and you can go back to just simply viewing the rest of the committee meeting, should you choose to do that. I think that's probably about it. For my members, I guess I'll just remind you of all the rules of decorum of the legislature apply to this meeting, which I need not have to go through all of those, of course. But if the most important thing is how you participate, which you can probably assume how you do that. The best way to do that is just to raise your hand. You can raise the digital hand or just raise your physical hand. It's easier if you just put a hand up in front of the screen. Then I know to call on you, I'll call on you. And if there are any amendments or anything of that nature that we vote on, those are just voice votes. But because we are in the digital format, those voice votes will be held by hand votes, which again, your hand being raised in front of the screen, or the little hand, a little yellow hand that you can raise up virtually. And then any final votes taken on a bill that is moved by the committee will be a roll call vote through the staff. So that's pretty much the procedure. And as we go, if you have questions about procedure, you just let me know, and we'll get you squared away on that. So with that, we'll move to our first order of, well, let me back up and let me just check and make sure no representatives have any questions or any opening comments any of you would like to make before we begin. Nope. Get 9 politicians in a room and nobody wants to talk except for me. Weird. Okay, we'll move to our first order of business, which is House Bill 42, Chancery Court Vacancy Amendments. And for this bill, we are gonna, on deck is gonna be Lily Sharp with the Supreme Court and Alyssa Butler. And I think we'll bring you both in at the same time is probably the best way to do this.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to admit Lily Sharp and Elisa now?
Yes, Donna, please. As they're making their way in, members, this is a newer bill for you because this is a bill that is sponsored by the Select Committee on Blockchain. Well, not new to Representative Yin, I suppose. This is a bill that is sponsored by the Blockchain, Digital Innovation and Technologies Committee. But we'll be taking up the bill from here. So this will be new for most of you. Welcome, Ms. Butler and Ms. Sharp.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. And it's nice to meet you. It'll be nice to meet you in person, the new members of the committee. A couple of them I know already, and I think you had a really good committee this year. I have, if Chairman, if it's okay, we also, if Ms. Shippen could also let Claire Smith in. She is our Chief Financial Officer. So if you have any questions about the funding that is behind the Chancery Court, she can ask those questions. I'm Lily Sharp. I'm the State Court Administrator. And with me is Elisa Butler. Elisa is our General Counsel for the Office of Court Administration. And Claire Smith is also with us. She's our Chief Financial Officer. And so I'll give you a little tiny bit of background for those who are new about the bill, and then Elisa and Claire can tell you more in depth about the Chancery Court, where we are right now in terms of the case management system and the e-filing system, and in terms of right now without changes, where we are in terms of hiring. In 2019, Senator Perkins and a number of other legislators sponsored the Chancery Court bill. And what that bill does is it creates a court to preside over business and commercial litigation cases. And what that first bill provided is that for the initial startup until 2022, the bill authorized the Supreme Court to appoint retired or active judges to sit on the Chancery Court. And then in 2020, and then that first bill required that the governor would appoint the first full-time Chancery Court judge in 2022. That judge then would have they have jurisdiction again for these complex business cases. They would be paid the same amount as a district court judge, and they would have statewide jurisdiction. Then in 2020, there were just some minor amendments to the bill, nothing major. And then what this bill does, it's my understanding there's actually 2 bills, one bill that you are looking at, and then another bill that is in the Joint Appropriations Committee just extends that 2022 date for appointing the full-time judge. And yours extends it to 2026. And I believe the JAC one extends it to 2024. So that's just the background of it. And Elisa, do you want to tell them a little bit more about the actual court?
Sure, absolutely. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Elisa Butler, and I am General Counsel for Court Administration at the Wyoming Supreme Court. Since this bill was enacted, the Supreme Court has been working toward creating the Chancery Court and all that entails, including creating a Chancery Court committee to look at location, also to look at some of the court automation systems that are required and some of the work that has to be done there, and including research on the judges and how that would all work. So the committee, the Chancery Court Committee, which is chaired by Justice Fox, has been working hard on those issues over the last few years. Right now, the Supreme Court has enacted rules for the Chancery Court. Those were put into place, I believe, in January of 2020. And then the bar was given the opportunity to comment on those rules, and there will likely be a few amendments as we move forward based on comments from the bar. The Chancery Court Committee actually has a meeting scheduled next week to talk about those comments, and we will move things forward from there. As far as court automation, we have currently working through a case management system and getting that configured and ready for the court. And we have also entered into a contract for an e-filing system in the Chancery Court, and those will likely be ready by the end of the year. And so we anticipate that we will be able to put the Chancery Court, get the Chancery Court up and running by December of this year. So that's just a very brief kind of history of what the court's been doing over the last few years to get that Chancery Court up and running.
Thanks, Ms. Butler. Ms. Smith, did you have anything to add, or are you just on standby for when we jump into? I mean, because I guess you could discuss the budgetary portion of this, which is the real reason for the delay in the enactment.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So with the budget cuts that we had to do this year to deal with the state's budget crisis, one of the things that we offered up was, instead of having a full-time judge doing Chancery Court, the district judges would take on the responsibility until the point in time that we want to have a full-time judge. So the budget for Chancery Court was cut in half under the assumption that district judges will fill the judge position until the point in time that we want to appoint the full-time judge and incur the cost of a full court. So basically, we're looking at half the budget right now. With this bill, if you did extend the date until 2026, then we would not have to increase the Chancery Court budget until budget fiscal year 25. So there's plenty of money in there right now to get through the things that we need to do until that point, to cover a law clerk that would assist the district judges, and then, just some of the minor costs that you would have in running this court. So if there's any other questions on the budget piece of it, I'm happy to answer.
Representative Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whichever one of you three would like to field this one. Over the interim, we heard about workload issues in the district court and some requests for perhaps coming up with a plan to increase the number of district court judges because of workload. Can you articulate how now we have sufficient staff within the judiciary to take on Chancery Court at the same time we're being told that the district courts are over?
I can,
Ms. Sharp.
Mr. Chairman, what the district court judges, all the entire conference, basically they agreed to this, and what they have decided is that whoever the judges are that are appointed or that agree to be the Chancery Court judges, that the other judges will pitch in and take some of their cases if those judges become overworked. Now they will become overworked, but they are willing to do this. It was their contribution to the state is basically just to work harder and get this done while we're during this crisis period, financial crisis period. The one thing is, and Claire, you can cover this about the funding for the law clerk.
Ms. Smith?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The assumption that we have made is that we will hire a law clerk probably towards the end of this year, a few months before the case management system is in place. That will give the law clerk time to understand the system, to be able to help the district judges in their role with the Chancery Court. This person would also act as the clerk of court and handle everything that needs to be done with Chancery Court outside of what the judges do.
Follow up, Representative Washit.
Yes, thank you. That's helpful. I still don't understand how the workload of the district court won't be impacted by taking on additional work. So what I hear you saying is we're going to have judges from one part of the state traveling to another part of the state to cover workload for the judge who's doing Chancery Court. Is that correct?
Ms. Sharp, maybe you can explain, because my guess is it's judges that are going to be within the same district or neighboring district. Maybe it's probably how that shakes out.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Washit, Chairman Olson is correct. It depends which district you're in. If you are in a multi-judge district like Laramie County, it's more likely that one of the judges who will take on extra cases is the judges in that district, in the multi-judge district. But also right now we have, luckily because of CARES Act money, we have upgraded the technology throughout the entire state. I think all but 1 or 2 courtrooms. So much of the proceedings, most of the judges are able to do a substantial amount of their work by video conferencing. So that also increases the ability to judges to sit in for each other. But there's no question, it will absolutely increase the workload of the district court judges. There's no question it will do that.
Any more follow-up, Representative Washit?
Yes, one more if no one else. I want to dominate here, but I also remember during the testimony in 2019 on Chancery Court, we were told that the litigants in these types of cases would be willing to pay substantially higher filing fees and so forth, and that could be used to cover most of the costs of the court. Is that still the case, or do we know what those fees are going to be?
Ms. Sharp?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Washit, that information that the fees would cover the cost of the court was not from the Supreme Court, because we could have told you that the fees absolutely will not cover this. The fees right now by statute are at $500 unless the Supreme Court creates a higher fee. And so especially at the beginning of the court, that wouldn't go very far at all. Now down the road, if it becomes a very, very busy court and it ends up being like a Delaware of the West, and the fees might likely have to be increased, it may be able to pay for itself a little bit, but I will actually turn that over to Claire, because I think she has she knows how much these courts cost, and they're very expensive.
Ms. Smith, so maybe kind of in clarifying the answer to that question too, it sounds like, I mean, one, clarifying, right, that in delaying the enactment date, there's not an appropriation, an additional appropriation, except for, and this was going to be my question, except for, help me understand where the money for the law clerk comes from. And then I think expand upon what you guys think that $500 fee is going to cover, you know, how much we would generate. I mean, that all depends on caseload and a lot of unknowns, obviously, but go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So I'll answer your question first. How is the law clerk going to be paid for? So the remaining appropriation that we have for budget fiscal year 21 that we're currently in, once JAC cut that budget in half, we have approximately $600,000 left, which is more than adequate to cover a law clerk. If that amount rolls over into budget fiscal year 23, again, that is adequate funds for a law clerk and then some. We'd very likely have some reversions. We wouldn't use all that funding. So to address the second question though, the cost of this court. So we anticipate that it will be very similar to the cost of a district court. And that for a biennium is approximately 1.1 million. There might be slightly more costs in the Chancery Court because they do have their own case management system that will incur some maintenance and support costs. So at 1.1 million, it would take an awful lot of filings at $500 a piece to cover that. We did do some analysis on this a year or so ago, and I apologize, I didn't look at that prior to this meeting, but we found that it's highly unlikely to get to the point where it would cover itself 100% with filing fees, unless those filing fees were far more substantial than the 500 that's in statute right now.
Ms. Smith, the $1.1 million is what is the cost of what district?
Mr. Chairman, that's just an average. A typical district court biennial budget is around 1.1 million. That covers a judge, a court reporter, a law clerk, a JA, and then their additional operating costs. With a Chancery Court, you'd have a judge, a court reporter, a law clerk, a JA, and then likely a clerk of court at the point in time that this court becomes so busy that it needs its own clerk of court. In the meantime, those functions could be absorbed by the law clerk or the JA.
So the constants that make up the average cost, they really don't change whether you're in Crook County or Laramie County. It's one judge, one assistant, one reporter, and there could be, whether there's 20 cases or 200 cases, that's not going to change the cost of the judge, his or her assistant, and the other. How many staff did you outline?
Mr. Chairman, there is a judge and 3 staff members, and you're correct. It wouldn't really change from one court to the next. You know, the bulk of their budget is payroll. Transcript fees would vary depending on how busy the court is, but not such a substantial amount that you're going to see a huge difference in the overall budget from one court to another.
I see. This could be for Ms. Smith or anyone, maybe you, Ms. Sharp, because you referenced it. The JAC bill that would extend the deadline until 2024. Ms. Smith, you indicated that our bill would extend it to 2026, which means that's based on the budget. That's based on the budget cycle. So I guess I don't understand the 2024 date in the JAC bill, or what is the budgetary and overall outcome difference of 2024 versus 2026?
Mr. Chairman, I'll answer that. So the JAC bill actually extends the date 1 year. It would have us filling the judge position March 1st, 2023, not 24. So the fiscal impact to that, so that would mean in budget fiscal year 23, we have a judge in place for 16 months. And then in the following biennium, of course, we have the judge in place for a full 24 months. If we don't fill that position until 2026, then over the next 2 biennium, we're only looking at a 4-month period where we're paying for a judge. Based on the way that the budget sits right now, that means if we filled it in 2023, over the next 2 biennium, we'd have to add approximately $400,000 to that budget to cover the additional judge costs. If we waited until 2026 to fill that position, then we wouldn't have to add any money to this budget until budget fiscal year 25, and it would only be approximately $50,000. So the difference, the fiscal difference between these 2 dates, approximately $350,000. And I've made some assumptions in there on the other positions that we would fill. It's just hard to say without knowing how busy this court is going to be. It's hard to say when we would have to bring in an additional person beyond the law clerk. So approximately $350,000 difference between the 2 dates.
See, I knew there was a good reason why we chose 2026, because we were looking out for the budget of our Supreme Court, and we didn't want to hit you with that extra
Thank you.
money. So it seems, and I would ask you if there is well, I suppose there would be a preference of the Supreme Court between the dates. Then what would be the preferential date?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that. The Supreme Court has no preference. We will do whatever the legislature would like us to do, and we'll have it up and running whenever you want it to be.
Okay, well, yeah, that's expected. Appreciate that, Ms. Sharp. Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From the testimony I've heard so far, I'm getting a little nervous about the whole idea of a chancery court. Much of the premise that I think the legislature was presented with when it was presented by other legislators, and Ms. Sharp is correct, it was not the court that gave us the numbers, but we were told that the chancery court could use an existing courtroom, and now we're constructing a new chancery courtroom in Casper, as I understand it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I see your head shaking a little bit there.
Yeah, Representative Washit, I think that's, so maybe we should back up and kind of walk through the administrative side and the building side, and just kind of maybe go back through what happens when we push the date out. Is when we basically, if we back up, this was the choice. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Sharp, that the Supreme Court faced. As the Supreme Court looked at its budget, and although not mandatory to make reductions, because not subject to the governor's reductions to his executive branch, the judicial branch decided that it would make sense to make reductions to its own budget as well as whatever JAC would do, in solidarity to the other branches of government. So in doing that, of course, there's this brand new court and this huge amount of money that is on the table, and this is basically where we end up as the compromise, where you could either A, eliminate the Chancery Court, or B, delay it and not spend any money. So the Chancery Court under this bill, if you were to vote for this bill, if I understand this right, and Ms. Sharp, you could correct me if I'm wrong, they would not occupy the building in Casper, because it would be conducted by an existing judges. So if, for example, there were a judge in Laramie County were selected to hold court on behalf of the Chancery Court, then he or she would hold it in Laramie County, wouldn't travel to Casper for a courtroom. So I don't think that that's part of the delay. It's part of the savings. The building is a state building, if I understand it right, but maybe I don't think that's part of the Supreme Court's budget. So maybe Ms. Smith, you could clarify there isn't a part of the Supreme Court's budget that is the building in Casper.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. We initially had that in our budget for this biennium. It was pulled out of our request and put into state construction. So they have complete control of that at this point.
And then Ms. Smith or Ms. Sharp, whoever can clarify that, if existing district court judges sit on a panel as the Chancery Court, will they occupy a physical space in Casper?
Mr. Chairman, no, probably not. They will probably use their own courtrooms. If the courtroom in Casper is built out and for the Chancery Court, and again, we take no position on whether or not that should be done. But if it is built out, then there would be a chance that the retired judges, if they were to also be on the panel, could sit in the court in Casper. But if the building is not built out for the Chancery Court, then those retired judges would still just use the space. Would just work with district court judges to use their courtrooms.
And then Ms. Sharp, as a follow-up, maybe to help Representative Washington, if the panel judge elected to sit in Casper, would the Supreme Court be charged a rent for that? For the usage of the building?
So. Claire, I'm going to ask you because she'll know more. She knows more than I do.
Basically, Ms. Smith, where I'm going with this question is I'm trying to understand if the Chancery Court panelist judge uses the office space or does not use the office space, my understanding is it would not change the expense one bit.
Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding too. Correct.
So so the space is already there. Whatever, state construction, whatever it ends up being or whatever it's used for, I think the important part, at least for our understanding of this bill, is that whether we use a space or don't use a space, it doesn't have a budgetary effect. Unless we start remodeling it, but that's not what we're talking about. Does that help Representative Washit with the space issue? And then maybe you have a follow-up on the Casper building.
In terms of the Casper building, anyway, I do believe that there was an additional cost borne by the state of Wyoming, whether it came out of the Supreme Court budget or the state construction budget, but there was added costs to develop part of that state office building into a space that would be available for the Chancery Court eventually. I believe I'm accurate in that. And anything further, I'll just say for my comments when we come to the bill.
I understand. Okay. Committee, any other questions? Representative Yin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I wanted to clarify a little bit. The location of chambers, we didn't actually identify that in statute, so we delegated it to the Supreme Court to determine where the chambers are, as well as assignment of cases where they go, which is why they have this ability to do it virtually or put it wherever they want in the state. Or if they just so decide to build a set of chambers and put it in Casper or wherever. What my question would be to the courts is essentially, so I voted no on the creation of the Chancery Court. I honestly didn't think it was necessary. And I would like to see us figure out how we can slow out the rollout during this budget crisis that we're in. So is there anything other than just moving back the judge appointments that we could do to help slow this down? Or, I mean, I would be in favor of removing the court, but the Chancery Court, but I don't think that's going to be the will of the legislature. So I'll just leave it at that. Is there anything else other than the one date change in the statute that we can do to slow this down?
I'm sorry, Chairman Olson, I would have Claire answer that because she's the one that has worked with all of those positions.
Ms. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yen, no, there's not much more that would be done to slow this cost down. So the funding that has been set aside for the building, it was approximately $770,000. That piece of it is now in the control of state construction. So, I mean, that could possibly be delayed, but not eliminated. As far as the other costs for the court, so if we delay this date, of course, that's going to affect salary and benefits for a judge. It will also delay our need for the additional staff beyond a law clerk. So that's really the only cost that we would be able to slow down by moving to this later date. And then some very minor operating costs, but not enough to make any sort of significant difference.
Representative Yen, follow up?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, other questions? Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just had 3 people now communicate with me in the last 20 minutes that they're not sure what a Chancery Court is. And so I just want to make sure all the members are familiar with what Wyoming, I'm not sure if we gave the full background. I know Ms. Sharp touched on it. And then obviously Representative Yin mentioned that he wasn't in favor of these, creations, but per just the basic understanding for the new members of what they are, how Delaware operates them, if we could just do 1 minute for the people listening at home, since I keep getting questions.
Ms. Sharp, do you want to take a stab at that, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
Representative or Chairman Olson, I think you would probably do a better job than I would. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll take a stab at it, but you're gonna keep me straight. So if I mess anything up, because I only have a minute, you correct me. So yeah, especially for the new committee members, and well, I'm just new to Judiciary, and maybe you saw the issue pass through our chamber, but maybe you weren't paying too much attention to it. But so this story all begins with the blockchain legislation, and in the blockchain legislation deals, of course, with regulation that allows, or deregulation that allows for certain technologies to exist and thrive in Wyoming. But the other half of that has always been attracting new companies to Wyoming that operate here. But obviously the end goal is they domicile here, they employ people here, they pay their taxes here, they generate revenue for the state of Wyoming here. And so some of the changes over the years that have been made have been to corporate law and limited liability company law in order to attract those businesses. Well, one of the things that makes Delaware so attractive is not its limited liability company law, because its limited liability company law was copied from the 1970s Wyoming limited liability company law and made Delaware, of course. Its corporate law is on its own, makes it very popular. But overall, one of the things that has always made Delaware really popular is its Chancery Court. And the reason for that is what a Chancery Court is a specialized business court. So the idea here is that if you're a sophisticated business, generally a high net worth business, that you're going to go to this court under most of your contractual business disputes. And I won't get into the full jurisdictional legalese of it, but that's the basic sense of it. This is where you're going to go for your disputes, as opposed to your traditional district court that you might go into. And the reason why you do that in Wyoming may be a little bit different than the reason why you do that in Delaware. But the reason why the Chancery Court makes Delaware so attractive is predictability for the business. It's one thing to have laws on the books, which we do, It's another thing when you have a court that has precedent and is interpreting those laws, gives a business an understanding that when it goes in to that jurisdiction, that it knows how courts are going to treat those laws. And so the Chancery Court drives, many believe, a significant amount of registration and permanent business domiciliaries in Delaware because of the predictability of the court, which has been around for decades now. So a lot different than it will be even a year in the creation in Wyoming. But the other reason why you would go to a Chancery Court other than it's simply a business court is speed. So business deals much faster, of course, than sometimes courts can keep up. And if you're a high net worth business, you could pay $100 and whatever dollar filing fee to go into district court, I don't even know what it is, $150, I think, or you could pay $500 and get into this specialized court. And the theory is you're going to go a lot faster. You're going to get your resolution a lot quicker, and you're going to get back to business a lot sooner. So the ultimate idea of this Chancery Court is not just a specialized court, but it's to attract business is the end goal. So in the original creation of it, you needed particular judges that had an expertise in business and would become the experts that would mirror the Chancery Court in Delaware. What Ms. Sharp indicated is that the district court conference had met, and they believe they want to help, and they believe they have the sophistication and the expertise, and no doubt most of, if not all of the judges can handle a business case. They do it, or they did it in private practice or whatever. But the point is they can handle that. So that's the genesis of the Chancery Court. And its problem is that it comes into existence 1 year before major budgetary cuts. And so now the question is, it hasn't even started. So do you nix it, or do you modify its creation? So to be clear, this bill doesn't eliminate the Chancery Court, and this bill doesn't necessarily prolong the creation of the Chancery Court. What it does is allow for a different way of creating the Chancery Court to step into the full Chancery Court. It's interestingly, I think it answers Representative Washet's reservations because it's a trial run. You don't spend the full amount of money that you would spend to just hire a judge and all of his staff and say, let's get off and going. And then there's no filings, and then there's no money. And then we're just in the negative. Instead, we use existing budgets and existing district court judges. And then if people file, they file. If they don't, those district judges just keep handling the dockets they handle, and there's no change to the budget. But if it starts to take off, and it takes off really fast, this legislature could come back and amend that enactment date and roll it back to whatever date. And if it doesn't take off, there's another opportunity to extend it further out. Maybe add another 2 years, another 4 years, another whatever, allowing the district courts to continue to build it up. So that's where we're at. That's what the Chancery Court is. And that was much longer than 1 minute, Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you.
Representative Washet.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to know, do you have an idea of how many new businesses are going to have to file with the Secretary of State's office for us to recoup $1.1 million in annual?
Well, is that a question for me or for the Supreme Court, Representative Washet?
I'll take it from whoever. I was hoping maybe you would have a ballpark idea, because these mean like most of our new corporations that we're hoping to entice to come to Wyoming because of the creation of a Chancery Court, we're going to need an awful lot of them in order to offset a $1.1 million annual budget if our filing fees aren't going to be sufficient to cover the cost of the court.
Well, I'm a Representative Washet. I'm a lawyer, so I'm really terrible at math, but just my rough math would tell me about 10,000 businesses, because it's $100 per filing. So 10,000 businesses, and I wish we had the Secretary of State's office here because I don't know. I knew this at one point. I don't know off the top of my head how many limited liability companies are created annually in the state of Wyoming as an example, but I will tell you it's more than any other state in the country. And I will tell you that the Secretary of State's office deposited $53 million into the general fund. It's the only agency that does that. And the bulk of that money is coming from filings. So the amount of the filing money in the state of Wyoming is in the millions. I don't know exactly what it is. I think we could get you, Representative Washit, those numbers pretty easily. We would just have to get, I don't think the Supreme Court will have it, but the Secretary of State's office would have it. But like I said, 53 million, maybe even Representative Swanser knows, he's chairman of corporations, but it's something like $53 million was deposited in the general fund. Is that right, Representative Swanser?
For the biennium, yes, Mr. Chairman.
For the biennium. So I'm gonna say that hitting 10,000 new companies is not a huge feat for the state of Wyoming. Now, does that all go straight to, that goes to general fund? So does that go directly to pay this back? No. How many businesses would have to file in the court? Well, you can do that math. Is you obviously take 1 million and divide it by 500. So I'm not, it's a little less than 10,000.
Thank you.
Other questions, committee? Because if not, I have a few questions for the Supreme Court here. So no questions. Okay. So I wanted to ask about the enactment of the rules. And I think, Ms. Sharp, if I heard you right, those rules have already rolled out. So are there any, will it be necessary for the court to make any amendments to those rules because of the delay? And will those, I expect there won't be additional changes based on which version of the bill we were to adopt, whether it's JAC's bill or this bill. I suspect there would just be some changes generally.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'll let Elisa answer that because she is more familiar with the rules than I am.
Okay, Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chair, so you are correct. We, the court adopted rules last January, I believe, so January 2020. But that was basically with the understanding that there would need to be amendments along the way. So the legislature, as part of that legislation, required that we adopt rules by January 2020. So we got that done. And then we basically went through the comment process with the bar. So there is an anticipation that we're going to need to amend those rules. And there is a meeting of the Chancery Court Committee next week to go through those rules and determine what kind of changes will need to be made. I cannot tell you off the top of my head what specific changes would potentially need to be made based on this delay in hiring a Chancery Court judge, but there may be some, and we will be on the lookout for those as we make those amendments.
And Ms. Butler, then would that commission be able to meet and adopt those rules after the adoption of legislation if it were to be adopted, or is there an additional delay that we would have to wait on the rules, or what is the timing? What would the timing look like?
Mr. Chair, I'm not entirely certain what that would look like. So what will happen is the Chancery Court Committee will basically make recommendations to the court on those rule changes, and then the court will be the entity that actually adopts those. So I think, what we would need to do is do a real analysis of those rules and determine what kind of changes would potentially need to be made based on, whatever the legislature decides in terms of a delay. And if there are changes that need to be made, then the court may consider, not adopting any amendments until they're sure in terms of what kind of, timing changes they need to include in those amendments.
Okay. I think that's helpful. Committee, other questions for the court? Representative Craigo and Representative Oakley, you're strangely quiet. You have the Supreme Court essentially in front of you and can ask them any question you want on the planet. But it would be more fun, I guess, for you if it were the justices.
Yeah. Chairman Olson, I'll stay on topic.
Okay. All right. Do you three have anything else for us that you want to add or say?
No, Mr. Chairman, just that we will, we want to work with the legislature and we'll work as hard as we can to get the Chancery Court up and running, whether or not you delay the actual time when the governor will need to appoint a Chancery Court judge. Our district court judges, this was their one of their contributions. They, as you know, their budgets are very tight. They only have, their budgets are almost all salary, and it's for their judicial assistant, their court reporter, and their law clerk and the judge. So that's where that about 1.1 million comes. That's actually a biennial budget. And so there was very little room in their budgets to cut. They just don't have any other areas to cut. So this was their way of chipping in and saying, we'll take on extra work. And the Supreme Court, I believe, will be the ones who will actually decide which of the district court judges are experienced enough in business litigation to handle those cases. The original statute that was, or the original bill that passed in 2019, Representative or Chairman Olson, you're exactly right. It requires that a majority of the Chancery Court cases be resolved within 150 days. And Representative Craigo and Representative Oakley can both tell you that that is a very, very fast turnaround for cases to be resolved in court. And that's all we have.
It's a rocket docket. Okay, if that's all you have, I will say, so I did get this email, and most of you probably received it, but I would like this committee to take a moment of silence as we recently learned of the passing of our dear colleague, Senator Hank Coe. And so if you would please just join me in a moment of silence for Senator Coe. Thank you. Ryan, do we have any members of the public who would like to testify on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see anybody in the attendees list with their hand up, but if anyone wishes to testify, I believe they could do so now. I'll let you know.
Thanks. All right. Well, and with that, with this one, what I'll probably do, Ms. Sharp, for you three is ask you to stick around while we, if the bill is moved, and then just in case we have, I'll close public comment, but just in case, I think it would be appropriate to bring one or all of you back in if we had a burning question. And I'm not seeing any hands for additional public comment. So with that, I will close public comment. And committee, what is your pleasure on the bill?
Move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Zwanitzer, move the bill. Second by Representative Yen. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the bill. Representative Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to vote yes on the amendment because I think it's better than the status quo. But I am quickly losing enthusiasm for this whole concept of a chancery court. I think that especially given the financial circumstances that we're facing, we're going to have state employees lose their employment. To start up a court in this environment, to me seems problematic. So I'm a yes on the amendment because I think it's the right thing to do at this juncture. But boy, I'm disappointed in a lot of what I heard in testimony on the floor in 2019 when this bill was passed, and how much of that just hasn't come to fruition.
Thank you. Committee, any other discussion of the bill? No discussion. Let's work the bill then. So what we'll do is, this is a page turner, one page. So typically we would just go page by page and ask for amendments, and we're on page 1. Committee, I would ask if anybody has any amendments to this bill, which would basically be the date. It sounds like, committee, you're content with the 2026 date. Okay, no amendments, no discussion. So with that, we'll proceed to the vote. Oh, Representative Zwanitzer.
Question.
Thank you. Question on the bill. Ryan, will you please call the vote? Ryan, you're muted.
You'd think we'd get that by now. Mr. Chairman, sorry about that. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the vote is on House Bill 42, Chancery Court Vacancy Amendments. Representative Crago.
Aye.
Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Oakley.
Aye.
Representative Provenza.
Aye.
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Aye.
Representative Washit.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Representative Zwanitzer.
Aye.
And Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Motion passes 9-9, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, committee. We're off to a good start. Supreme Court, Lily, Ms. Butler, Ms. Smith, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. We appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your day. And you can come testify anytime you want. All right, with that, we'll move to our next piece of legislation, which is House Bill 34. House Bill 34, Youthful Offender Program Amendments. And for this, I should have given Mr. Shannon some warning to say you're on deck, Mr. Shannon. But with that, Ryan, I'd like to admit Mr. Shannon. Welcome, Mr. Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Dan Shannon, Director of Department of Corrections. Thank you for having me today. Appreciate it.
Mr. Shannon, I was going to, I wasn't here during the interim, so if this is not true, just correct me, but I'm not 100% positive of the genesis of this legislation. Was this brought by Department of Corrections?
It was, Mr. Chairman, and I'll graciously provide you an update into committee members if you ask one.
Yep, Mr. Shannon, that's what I was going to ask then. If you could back it up to because this is a new committee and new to this legislation, with the exception of Vice Chairman Washit, Mr. Shannon, just give us a brief introduction of the genesis of the bill, synopsis, and then update, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, this bill and this recommended change from the Department of Corrections was brought forth by the department, and it's been in place for some time now. I've asked at the last session for an interim topic committee to change our youthful offender program, our boot camp, and for the following reasons. During January, I brought testimony forth in January of this year before the Joint Judiciary Interim Committee, and I'll bring the similar information to you at a time. Our success within the Department of Corrections boot camp. The boot camp is located in Newcastle at our Wyoming Honor and Conservation Camp. The success has not been very well. Over the past 10 years, our highest rate that we were able to accomplish was a 64% completion rate. It was even as low in 2011, down to 25%. Our participation as well, we track 3 years out if on the rate of return. And what I mean by that is the recidivism if an individual is rearrested and what success. This program is for up to age 25. It's a military style program. And bottom line is it hasn't been very successful. Our rate of return or our recidivism rate is actually better to release inmates directly from our penitentiary. So with that, we've been concerned for quite some time. We do appreciate an alternative sentencing, and we want to keep this program, but under a different format. Even though we've had few individuals come back and return with great success, we can do so much better within our department. Each program that we're going to utilize, it's not based on the military style. It will be based on physical as well as mental fitness. It's enough to try to get our young offenders, but rather through an approach. And our goal is to have the offender learn practice and importance of physical exercise as well as mental exercise in order to be healthy all year round. We're looking at it as a cognitive based. Throughout the nation, there are 3. We were one of 3 that allows female participation, which I find fascinating and almost overwhelmed by it. Pennsylvania, Florida, and our state. If you're a female incarcerated, if you're incarcerated as a female, because we don't have the program here, we actually we've had 3 females, we've shipped them out to Florida and or Pennsylvania. There are 2 additional states, Minnesota and Oklahoma, that also have male boot camps. Beyond that, all the other states have abandoned their program. I'm asking for an alteration of the program. I'm not abandoning it by any means. I believe we have great opportunities to improve our programming through cognitive data evidence-based programming, which I can explain to you later if you so like. So Mr. Chairman, how did we get where we're at right now? At the conclusion of our January Judiciary Interim Committee, our budget crisis took place, COVID took place. We faced a lot. In July, I made a determination that we're going to make quite a few changes to be efficient and effective within the department. During that period, and this will give a little explanation on where we're going with the boot camp, if I could have just a moment. We were housing inmates in Mississippi, in Nebraska. Our county jails were Goshen, Lincoln, Uinta, and Niobrara, to the tune of $430,000 a month. And I can report out that we don't have an inmate populace concern. What we do have is the staffing issue at WSP and our Women's Center. Our inmates are safely housed. We're more than meeting the standards, but we don't have an inmate population issue. So at that point in July, I made the determination to bring our inmates and return them home. Now we have an option. We can do nothing. We can get the 48% success rate out of our boot camp that we have now. And also with that, we would have to expand our Women's Center. And also due to other issues, we'd be building a female boot camp located in Newcastle to the sum of $14 million. I've taken it upon myself, and if the committee chooses not to move this bill forward, we'll make the corrections, but I've taken it upon myself over the past several months to meet with the State Building Commission and cancel the building of the female boot camp in Newcastle, as well as the expansion at the Women's Center. Reason being, it's not necessary. And I'll do this simplistic as possible, and I'll stand for questions. The courts have not utilized the program, even though we've promoted it for probably the last 5 to 6 years. We have a 64-bed unit in Newcastle. Within there, the highest number we've had was 23. It's my proposal, if we move this bill forward, to take those 23 individuals and we'll move them to G unit at our penitentiary. According to the act, they'll be isolated. They will be separated out. It's a 32-bed unit. Now with that, we at the Women's Center have an intensive treatment unit program that has over 90 people waiting to come in. It's a 9-month program. We would take our female inmates and we would utilize the boot camp at Newcastle. It's a 64-bed unit. During the first segment, we would coincide a program at the Women's Center for Intensive Treatment Unit for Substance Abuse and also Newcastle. At the conclusion of the first graduation, all our ladies would go to Newcastle and go in the boot camp building. Now that would create and eliminate the funnel that's been overpopulated and also provide our female inmates the same opportunities as we provide our males. By doing so, for years, we've not had a female program to the boot camp that didn't provide the same opportunities as our male inmates. What we would do then is our Hall 4 we've had 3 female inmate boot participants in the last 4 years. These individuals would be on grounds at the Women's Center in Hall 4. We would not be shipping our ladies out of state. And also, we've housed females in Torrington for the past 10 years, female inmates within male facilities. Our policies are sound, they're accredited. Personally, I was a warden in another state for over 12 years where we had multi-gender individuals housed, and I don't have any concerns with that. So as I said, we can do nothing and hold tight and have the same results, or we can utilize our agency to house inmates appropriately within their classification and produce a better inmate going back to our community. Mr. Chairman, I've also submitted a fiscal note to advise the committee that we can do this at no cost. I believe it's within our budget. We prepared for the last several years to do so. And I would stand for questions at this time or remark on any questions you would have as you go through the bill, or I would do so for you, Mr. Chairman. It's your decision.
Committee Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Shannon, for bringing this information to us. You mentioned a cognitive behavioral program or some sort of evidence-based approach you're looking at. What specifically are you referring to?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, I can go down the list for you. Things that we'd utilize is motivational interviewing. That's something we've done for years, but we haven't provided it to our boot camp residents. We would go beyond trauma. That's specifically gender-based for male inmates. We would work with a program by Stephen Coventry for our female inmates. Such programs as Exploring Trauma, Men Helping Recovery. One part of the bill, it's on page, I believe it's on page 2, I could be wrong, is also utilizing a support from older inmates that are based specifically at those facilities. So it'd be a WSP, our penitentiary in Rawlins, as well as our Women's Center. These would be interactive peer specialists that would be vetted, trained. Time has taught us that sometimes you get better response out of someone that they look to. Something else too, data is pretty clear that the human brain is developing. Now they're saying even up to age 31, 32. We asked during the interim talk to raise the age to 30. I have some information as well. In our current inmate population, if you bear with me for a moment, in our current inmate population, if we go to age 30, we have exactly 178 current inmates under age 25 incarcerated within our system. And we have 329 between the ages of 25 and 30. So it would definitely expand the program and provide less of a military style program and more of a cognitive based. Representative Provenza, the last would be basic life skills, mental health, substance abuse. What we would do is do a risk assessment upon their commitment, and it would have to be a specific program to those individuals.
Representative Provenza, follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. And just a quick question, kind of related. When you mentioned the recidivism rates in this program are far lower than sometimes than your general population. Is that when you're looking to also in control for the age? I mean, we know that younger folks are more likely to offend, and so they would have higher recidivism rates.
That is, Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, that is correct. The recommendation that I said 64.2%, 26% was our average. That was comparative to individuals under age 25 released from our penitentiary.
So as a follow-up, Director Shannon, how in restyling the program will you change those recidivism rates for the positive?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, it is my intent to utilize some of the programs we just spoke of to have less physical interaction and address their actual needs, to work with the youthful offenders to raise the recidivism rates. And I'll give you an example. At least what I hope this is a comparative for you. Individual 19, 20 years old wants to sign and join to service. It's volunteer. They have been vetted. They have a good record. It's something they want to do. Now we take that same individual and we incarcerate them and we say we're going to run a very similar program. Nationally, it's proven it's not working. So through our assessments when they first enter the program, we will be dealing with, say, 19, 20, 25, up to 30-year-olds, but we'll be dealing with them specifically on their risk needs, substance abuse, mental health, life skills. Many of them don't have life skills. And we will tailor our program to their specific needs, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if I may add with that, it's my hope, and I'm responsible for it, so I'll have to report back to the committees in the future to say what we've done. Thank you.
That is definitely true. We'll definitely follow up with you on it, because we're obviously, the success of it means less incarceration, means less dollars spent by the state, and means more productive citizens producing in our economy and in our world. Just as a quick follow-up then, Director Shannon, so I can have that, so I make sure I have that list completely of what, when you say providing their their needs, meeting the needs in terms of cognitive therapy, substance abuse, training. Is that the list? Am I missing one?
No, Mr. Chairman, I will provide the committee a complete list of programs that'll be available before the end of business today.
That's helpful. And then just to tie that into the cost. So you testified that there would be, you would do this at no additional cost to the state. And so then that's my question on that list of services that you're going to provide us. How can explain to me how you can provide all of those services at no additional cost? Is it because all those services are already contracted for and being provided through different programs?
Mr. Chairman, many are contracted, and we're providing those services to other inmates in different facilities, as well as many of our own employees are certified within these programs.
And none of those programs require any change in the physical building itself.
No, what we're doing is we're relocating our inmates to ensure we have the appropriate space instead of housing them out of state at almost $500,000 a year for the past several years.
Right. You, Director Shannon, which I deeply appreciate, but trying to, not that I believe you're doing this. I have great faith in what you're going to accomplish as Director of Corrections and with this program. I truly do. But what I have to make sure, at least that we're conveying to the public, is that we're not just eliminating a facility and moving people into existing facilities, and then they will receive all of the existing treatment that and programs that already exist. So then the program itself is really gone. You're just folding them back into existing programs, existing facilities. But that's not what you're saying. You're saying you're going to provide them with a specialized program. Beyond the pure specialist would be one difference, but these people will receive a more focused training, treatment, etc., than they would otherwise receive at that facility where there are currently people housed.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I can answer your question this way. I can assure all, I'm not going to warehouse inmates. I'm not going to just move inmates and say, look, we saved $1. We will be creating a new program that will be available from the components that I'll forward to the committee that are spread throughout the state now. I'm bringing into one. As far as our intensive treatment program, I was a warden at the Women's Center for 3 years, 2007 to 2010. In our therapeutic communities, it's taught to separate so the ladies can focus on themselves. That exact same program that's being taught now would be provided the opportunity for our female inmates at a much larger area, thereby taking the backlog. We have ladies that are within our community. It'll take years for them to get in the program where they could be back in the community. As far as the individuals to going to our boot camps, and the difference would be instead of reporting to Newcastle after they're classified within our Torrington reception center, they'd be going to WSP in our G unit, which is completely separated from our population. That program will be designed for those specific needs.
Okay, and just to clarify on that last, because that was one of my other questions, to clarify on that transfer. So they go into, everyone goes into Torrington where they get sorted out, sent where they go. That's their processing facility. And they all go, anyone in this program now goes to the G unit, or that's just the males go into the G unit, or you're putting females and males in the G unit at WSP?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, neither at this time. If this bill becomes effective and signed by our governor, only then would we send males. Right now, nothing has changed. Our males are in Newcastle at WHCC. Our females are sent out of state. So what would take place in the event that we're able to have this legislatively approved? What would take place is our males would come to our reception center at Torrington. Upon classification and upon reception, they would then go to G unit at the Wyoming State Penitentiary. Our females would be received at our female unit. Instead of being shipped out of state, they would stay in Lusk at the facility with the same program that we're going to offer in G unit, but it would be separate. It'll be more gender-based for the ladies.
Okay, and I understood that's not what you're doing now. And when I'm speaking of you doing it, I mean in the context of if the bill were to pass. But I guess I was trying to clarify the separation of male and female, because you had made a statement about how you had worked in facilities with where they were housed in the same facility. So you were just referencing that. That's not what is that a potential end result, or were you just referencing that?
Mr. Chairman, I was referencing that. The reason that I made my comment was it'll be a change for Newcastle to have female inmates. Now, those inmates would be where our current boot camp is, which is isolated within the compound around a double fence. It's a medium level facility. So the ladies would be completely separate from our male inmates there. And I was making reference that would be a change for our Newcastle facility.
I got you. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Representative Washut, I saw your hand go up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Shannon, is it full-time director now, and is congratulations in order here?
I don't know if it's congratulations, Mr. Chairman, Representative Washut, but yes, it's full-time.
Thank you.
I will just slightly butt in, Representative Washut. It is absolutely congratulations. As the rest of you will see when your budget is presented to you, Director Shannon sliced and diced not to the detriment of the Department of Corrections, but to the savings of the state, the tune of, is it 40 million, 50 million, Director Shannon?
Mr. Chairman, 46 million, yes.
$46 million, and gave one of the best presentations the Joint Appropriations Committee has ever seen in the history, not just of the Department of Corrections, but in just across the board. It was phenomenal. So, congratulations is in order. Go ahead, Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well done, Director. Fresh eyes in a time of crisis, really reassuring that we have the department in good hands. And thank you so much for your hard work. I just asked, maybe you could supply to us in writing a kind of a description of these body changes that move from one prison facility and out of state and where they're going to go. And we went through that kind of fast, and I didn't get it all written down. So if you could supply that in writing. And then my other question for you is, are we not doing anything cognitively based presently in the boot camp program? Does MI not play into the approach with inmates presently in the boot camp?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Washup, I'll answer two of your questions. To clearly lay out how we'll move inmates, I'll be able to do that tomorrow. I won't get that done this evening, but I'll get that done tomorrow for you. MI is not following up under the current boot camp model. We've been following that. In the past 2 years, we just recently brought substance use therapy for our juveniles, but we've been strictly following a juvenile boot camp model, which has not included the cognitive base. Could we do it and hopefully improve, which I believe we will? I don't know how we could not. Could we do it at the current location? Yes, we could, but it's really going to come back on the efficiency of how we're running our department.
Representative Washit, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Shannon, under this new approach, this youthful offender approach as opposed to a boot camp, is all of the military drill type stuff gone? Is that completely eliminated from the approach?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Washup, it is not gone. It is reduced. There will be physical activities every single day, and there will be a disciplined approach. However, we're not going to spend majority of our time on just physical discipline. We're going to address the assessed needs of those youthful offenders.
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Shannon, thank you for joining us. Taking a look at this bill, I mean, I'll probably vote for it. I am wondering what, on page 2, lines 22 and 23, I'm wondering what the reasoning for these lines are. Were there people being put into boot camp who weren't recommended to be put into boot camp? What can you explain to me what the genesis of this new qualification is?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ying, yes, I may. The courts sentence offenders to the Department of Corrections with a recommendation. That provides, there are individuals that physically could not participate in the current boot camp, which we addressed also in this bill. What that does is it provides the Department of Corrections the authority to accept them within the program. Because our past bills only provided a recommendation, the courts would provide a recommendation. And it was my preference that if that's the intent of the court, we're not here to be the policymakers, we're going to follow the intent. So if all possible, we're going to get them into the program that the court's requesting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So Director Shannon, just to clarify that for the committee who may be new to this, seeing how that process would unfold in the legal system, an offender would, the person who is, they're convicted by the court is the one who will decide if this is a program for them, or is there a mechanism after sentencing for the Department of Corrections to move someone into this program, or must that only come from a judge?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, the current practice is the court makes a sentence to the Department of Corrections with a recommendation for the current boot camp. That provides the Department of Corrections the opportunity to say yes or no. I believe that that affected the success rate of the completion of the program. So if it is the court's intent, if you look on page 4 of the bill, I had it reviewed through the Attorney General's office. We're not going to eliminate, the example would be fitting for this. We're not going to, because someone would have an ADA claim or needs an alternative. I reviewed it through LSO as well as the AG's office. And on page 4, you'll find, on page 4, line 4, it would be Romanet 4 as well. It talks about that we will accept folks that also need reasonable accommodations. So to sum it up, currently the courts will sentence to the Department of Corrections with a recommendation to a boot camp. And if that's the court's intent that they want individuals to participate in a youthful offender program, we're going to accept them and do our very best, regardless. If an individual now physically wouldn't be capable and couldn't pass the physical, we don't accept them. And I don't know how that's sending out a better product. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Director Shannon, that's very helpful. So then if the court does not provide the recommendation, they just provide a sentencing, but they meet this requirement, is able to participate in the structured program, education, work, and physical fitness activities required of the program participants in compliance with ADA that you referenced on page 4. Can the Department of Corrections then just assign the individual if they meet the age and the physical requirements?
Mr. Chairman, we do not have the authority to assign, because it also provides the offender an opportunity to shorten their sentence and petition in court within a year to change their commitment.
So only the court can provide the recommendation that the individual go to the program.
That's correct. The Department of Corrections does not have the authority to alter any or make any recommendations different than what the court has provided.
So in total, interestingly, the success of this program does not necessarily hinge on how great you and your program is, Director Shannon, or what even we do to wrap around the project, but simply in judges may not send participants. They may send participants. They may send the wrong participants. They may send the right participants. But the success of the program will ultimately depend on who is sent, when, and et cetera. And that's all in the sentencing court's hands.
Mr. Chairman, as with corrections itself, we have no say-so in who comes to us. Our light is always on, so to speak. We accept any individuals that come to us. I do have plans to go speak with the courts and the judges as this bill advances.
Okay, that's helpful. I like that.
Yes.
And then, so that, because I think there's a little bit of an education component then, Director Shannon, for the judges conference, right? So that they are all fully aware that the program has this paradigm shift and it's just completely different, and they ought to consider it for the following reasons when they have the right candidate. And that's what you're going to do.
Mr. Chairman, I've met with just recently, this past week, met with the administrator and field services, our probation and parole, and I asked to have meetings set up regardless, because we're going to change a little bit of way that we do our field service work as well. And one component to meeting with the courts is to personally interact with the judges to ensure that they have a clear understanding what we have to offer. Now, if they so choose to do it, that's the court's call.
And Director Shannon, does the Department of Corrections play a part in the pre-sentence investigation report? So is there a recommendation that could initially come from the Department of Corrections during the PSI, or no? I'm not a criminal lawyer, so I know nothing in this area.
Mr. Chairman, our Wyoming Department of Corrections is one of 26 states that also includes probation and parole in with its correctional facilities. And during the pre-sentence investigations, if it's more especially if it'd be a revocation to pro agent, would have an opportunity to provide a recommendation to the court.
Okay. Committee? Other questions for Director Shannon? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Director Shannon. In the peer programming portion, where we're allowing for peers to be involved in the process, given that you are now trying to focus towards the more cognitive behavioral evidence-based approaches, how is that going to fit in with the making sure that the peer specialist is going to adhere to those approaches as well?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, the individuals will be long-term inmates that are vetted, that have been classified to a minimum classification. Usually these individuals have demonstrated their rule following ability in some excess of 10 years. They will work directly with a supervisor, a staff member inside the unit. We have what's called, instead of linear facilities, we have what's called a direct supervision module within our Department of Corrections. So interactions with the peer specialists will be under supervision.
Follow up, Representative Provenza?
No, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may also call back.
Please.
Representative Provenza, we have a hospice program within our Torrington facility where we've had peer specialists similar to this for years now. And we've had quite a bit of success with it. So I feel confident that we can transform that over to our juveniles. At least the data says we can. We're going to certainly find out. I'd be foolhardy not to make the attempt. Thank you for listening.
Director Shannon, is it possible to put if one of my colleagues asked me if they looked at this provision about peer specialists and they said, so how many inmates are there that would be able to, if this bill were enacted tomorrow, how many inmates would be able to step in and fill that role?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, at this time, 0, but it would be our intent to have 4 peer specialists.
And how long, Director Shannon, would it take to get those 4 peer specialists the training that they need in order, the certified training that they need?
Probably within 6 months.
And Director Shannon, is it that certification is it a national certification, and who certifies them?
The certification is through ACA. It's not through. We're not going to have it through a national certification. We have certifications with our local community colleges on other. There'll be certification. It will not be for the peer specialists. There is not a national certification in that aspect available.
So their certification, Director Shannon, will come through potentially our community colleges?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Oh,
there's not a national certification. We will have courses that will come to our community colleges. It'll be online.
So, okay. So help me understand line 8 then. When it says certified training, who certifies it?
The certification will be a listing of, we have through our American Correctional Association as well as the National Institute of Corrections, there is definitions for peer specialists and what they believe the criteria would be. Misconduct free for a period of 5 years. Minimum classification for a period in excess of 5 years. There are certain courses, and I don't have them off the top of my head. There are certain courses they must take online as well as under supervision of our staff, and I could present that to the committee.
I don't want to overwhelm you with requests, but I just want to be prepared when our colleagues ask us questions. And then during the session, I have to shoot you an email, and you have to, in the middle of the busiest time of year for you, when you're trying to deal with your budget, I don't want you to have to find that for us. So if you could forward that to us along with the other information that's been requested so far, that would be helpful, Director Shannon.
Mr. Chairman, I'll do my best to have that to the committee by tomorrow.
And you have more time than tomorrow, Director Shannon. We won't need this until we present it to the, if this bill is moved and passed and we present it to the floor, that's that's going to be at the end of this month. So you got a little bit of time. Don't overwork yourself.
Well, thank you, sir.
Other questions for Director Shannon? All right. Director Shannon, do you have anything else that you think we ought to know or that you want to share with us?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, as I indicated to the Judiciary in our committee, if the bill became effective January, business still must go on. If the bill became effective July 1st, we're going to have individuals in our present programming. During January's session, I advised that if the bill became effective July 1st of 2021, that we would stop taking our inmates from our regular boot camp programming in February. Because of COVID and the way the legislative session's been established, I think that's out the window now. So in the event that this bill would become effective July 1st, through attrition, I would finish out our current sentence boot camp inmates and then transition to our new programming in Rollins and the Women's Center.
So Director Shannon, what would be your preference then? Would your preference be a different enactment date, or is that your preferred process?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, that would be my preferred process because we're still uncertain what will happen in the near future months. And it'd be out of line for me to start calling the courts and try to alter sentences. I'm not going to do that. So I would make the adjustments as necessary.
Actually, I do have one more question now because I want to make sure I've got this summarized really succinctly. And this is just a dollars question. So understand it's not, if this were enacted, it's not going to cost you anything or the state anything to do this. But you mentioned some numbers about what the out-of-state housing was costing us, $400,000 per month in housing out of state. Just what is the dollar figure biennially that the state of Wyoming saves by enacting this legislation, by enacting the new program change?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm unable to provide that number. I can tell you it's a little over $41,000 a year to house an inmate. And I provided the cost, Mr. Chairman, what we paid to house inmates out of state and such. The only way I could I could project it, I could work on that. It's all how successful the program would be. I can tell you the physical moves and the programming is not going to cost the state. I met with state construction, and it's my intent to put an additional fence at the recommendation of the prison administrator once they're able to review it. It'd probably be around housing unit A or B, and that'll provide medium housing there as well. That cost it's estimated around $280,000. And through our Superflex, we're going to pay for it ourselves. So to summarize, I don't have a number what it would save. It's my job to ensure that we're doing our best, that our inmates are released and not returning to our institutions and are coming back to our communities. So with that, it's my hope that we don't, in a very future, that we don't get into a position where we're housing inmates out of state.
Okay, and so we could succinctly at least say the change isn't going to cost us anything, but we're no longer housing out of state, which was costing us $400,000 per month approximately. And so that savings is going to occur. The ultimate savings of the program will depend on its success in terms of recidivism, et cetera. And rather than make you overpromise, I guess, what the savings might be, we'll overpromise that those will be very successful for you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, something else we can add, we no longer have to, we can have our female offenders have the same opportunity as our male offenders where they're not shipped to Florida or Pennsylvania. That's not free. There's a cost for that, and it's a high cost. So I think that's another benefit. If the program doesn't work, it's going to be a cost to me. I can assure you that. So, thank you.
And that's a great point, Director Shannon, and an unknown constitutional question, I guess, because that question been constitutionally heard in the state of Wyoming, the treatment of female prisoners in the boot camp different than that of men?
Mr. Chairman, I have to be cautious how I answer. I'll respond yes, but I believe that this pathway is the correct way, if I could answer it that way.
Yeah, right. So that's where I was trying to lead you, is that I guess the outcome is that we avoid a constitutional conundrum at the, regardless of everything else. Okay. Representative Washik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Shannon, you quickly mentioned that we didn't have a facility shortage here in the state, but we did have a staffing shortage here in the state. And then you moved on to another topic without belaboring things too much. Where are we at with staffing, and what's the department's prognosis for fixing the problem?
Director Shannon.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Washington, I can safely say that our facilities, we're meeting all mandatory requirements. At our 3 smaller facilities, we have 5 facilities, let's say it this way. Newcastle, WHCC, WMCI in Torrington, WWC in Lusk, WSP in Rawlins, and Wyoming Warner Farm in Riverton. At Riverton, we're at 100% capacity and staffing. And it's the same in Newcastle. At our Women's Center, we're down about 21% in staffing. Similar to our, it's a little bit less now with the budget cuts in Rawlins. We are meeting all mandatory requirements. I can report there's no safety concerns. However, there's an overtime concern, and it also affects the operations of our individuals. What we're doing is sending individuals from Torrington, our correctional officers, to WSP to make sure that we meet the appropriate staffing levels. And that's difficult on our staff to travel away from family, the overtime cost. I'm working with A&I. They recently have taken over recruiting. We're doing our very best to make sure people are paid appropriately, treated appropriately through management. And it's my end goal once I get through COVID, is my next project is staffing and retention. But I can assure the committee, we have not met our constitutionally required standards.
Thank you.
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to quickly follow up on the enactment date discussion, it wasn't clear to me. So I think you were saying you would like a new enactment date, but is there a specific date that you would like us to put in the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, I would ask that the enactment date remain the same, July 1st, 2021. I just wanted to advise the committee, I'll have to work with the courts. The example is if the courts next week sentence someone to the boot camp, we'll work through attrition before we move forward with it.
Sorry, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Chairman Olson. Director Shannon, what would be your expected date then of attrition, regardless of when we do the effective date?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, it would be once the bill would be signed, I would advise the courts from that date. So I don't know when that date would be. In the event that we were successful with the legislation, once that date was signed, I would advise the courts that we will no longer accept inmates. So if you're looking from that period, the example would be if it's April, I would count 6 months ahead, which would be September, October, and tell the courts, if you sentence up until this date, our inmates will remain in Newcastle until we complete the program.
Did you follow up, Representative Oakley, or that's it? Committee, other questions for Director Shannon? Okay. Another bite at the apple, Director Shannon. Anything else that you think we should know at this stage?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I wanted to say thank you for allowing me to provide the opportunity. regardless if the bill goes through or not, I'm going to do my very best at Newcastle and ensure that our ladies are taken care of. So I'm asking for your support, the best that I'm allowed to. It's important. This isn't just about financing. We're talking, we don't make widgets, Department of Corrections. We're responsible for human life and safety. And I want to make sure that our inmates have the best opportunity when they're released. So I'm asking, did you consider what was said today and vote accordingly? And if not, we'll adjust accordingly on our end. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Shannon. Really appreciate you coming in. Really appreciate you being really well prepared, and we definitely appreciate. Is that the laptop plug?
No, I apologize. I did the same with the JAC. My foot kicked the plug for my speakers. I couldn't hear what anybody was saying.
I remember that exact move in the JAC, and it was fast and it was slick then and it was slick now. Director Shannon, I deeply appreciate your willingness to follow up with information requested by the committee. And again, you don't have to get that to us tomorrow, just before we go into session on the 27th. Would just be really appreciative for us to have that. So I do appreciate in advance you working on that.
Will do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. And then Director Shannon, we won't boot you just yet. I'll ask you just to hang around and as we work the bill, just in case there's a question, you're the one to answer it. So we may have to call you back. So just hang around briefly if you have a minute or so.
Certainly. Thank you.
Okay. With that, do we have other public comment, Ryan?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see anybody with their hand raised, so I don't believe so. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for keeping me straight over there, Ryan. With that, I will close public comment. And committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the
Representative
bill.
Washington. Move the bill. Second. So been moved and seconded by Representative Washington, Representative Zwanitzer, and we'll move to discussion on the bill. General discussion on the bill, committee? Before we work it. No discussion on the bill. All right. Well, you're getting ready to discuss the bill, Representative Zwanitzer?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I guess I have some concern or issue with what a peer specialist is. Apparently it's someone who has a very long serving sentence, assumedly for a very serious crime, but they're going to be the person to help, the youthful or under 30 offenders to rehabilitate quicker. And I think I've seen that on some of those television shows late at night about, I think they're called like Scared Straight or whatever it is. It is just a fascinating concept to me that I guess if they can't get their sentences reduced, they can get back another way. That it seems a little out there, but if the current program's not getting any results and the new director says he thinks this is going to work and save money and be beneficial to reducing recidivism, I'm all for it.
So Representative Zwanitzer, I watched a show once called 90 Days. And in 90 days, it was a county jail. And I know what you're talking about because they had, that's exactly what would happen. Get the long-term offenders who have been in and out of the system and really knew the system. And they were educating the new ones that came in on everything from, race wars to gangs to how to manipulate corrections officers and all of those things. But I don't think that's probably what Director Shannon has in mind when he is thinking of peer specialists.
Agree. Thank you.
They are, I guess it's definitional, Representative Zwanitzer, I suppose. We could adjust this definition in statute. The peer specialist by statute means a long-term inmate who have completed certified training. Representative Swanser, we may have to ask Director Shannon what we would do if we monkeyed with this, but they don't have to be long-term inmates, I suppose. They could be those who have completed certified training and been selected and assigned by the department, not necessarily long-term, can be a brand new person, but excels in training. Representative Provenza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think we should, I would discourage changing the peer specialist. I know it sounds kind of strange, but I think it's an effective strategy that we found that has some evidence behind it. In terms of other things, I don't know specifically off the top of my head how that plays out within the penal system, but we know that in cases of mental illness, there are folks who have struggled with mental illness that help others, and that's a good strategy, and that's something that folks have found effective outside of kind of this area. I do want to say I support the bill, particularly now that we've heard from Director Shannon that they're moving towards these more evidence-based approaches, looking at some of these, looking at a more scientific or more effective way of trying to help youthful offenders. And I know Director Shannon mentioned youthful offenders being up to age 31 sometimes, and I would agree the evidence supports that. Frontal lobes aren't entirely fully developed, although hopefully no one tries to play that card on me for being a young person. But I think that this bill, allowing this program to kind of take new form in ways that are going to keep people out of our incarceration system, is going to end up saving our state some money. We don't want people back into prison. We want them to learn the skills that they need with either substance abuse or whatever brought them there in the first place, to be able to go back into society. And it sounds like they're moving in the right direction. And I'm eager to see those recidivism rates reduce. So I'm in support of this and moving forward.
Representative Provenza, my wife tells me all the time that my frontal lobe isn't fully developed, and until you just explained it, I didn't realize what she meant by that. But now I think I do. But on a serious note, Representative Provenza, and you're because you study these things, so just in your expertise, then peer specialist, long-term inmate, would a safe way to think about that be more like I refer to them as trustees. So when you're selecting someone to work in the kitchen with knives in a prison, you don't just select anyone, you select certain people. Is that what we're talking about here? We're select, more like a trustee. Are they going to be on that level?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I guess I would see, you'd probably need to ask Director Shannon exactly what his thoughts are on that. But I would say that it's kind of like a mentor, someone who they're stuck there, they can't get out of it. And maybe they've learned a lot, because a lot of people age out of crime, but they're still serving time. Those would be good people to serve as, in some ways, maybe a mentor or peer specialist, particularly given that they're going to receive training. It's not so much that they've been incarcerated for 10 years and haven't been bad or done anything during their time. It's just they also have training. So I think looking at it in that way.
So a lot of hands go up. Representative Yeen, was your hand up? No, but Representative Oakley, yours was up. And I've got you next, Representative Washington.
If I can get off mute, it was Chairman Olson. I guess I would just like to, reiterate or agree with Representative Provenza in speaking in support of this. I have to commend the director. From what I've seen, I think it looks like there's multiple angles for improvement from this. And from hearing from him today, from this sort of restructuring and utilization of resources that we currently have, something that I didn't necessarily know from the bill as it relates to the youthful offender. But if we can increase the ITU opportunities, I know that's really significant. That is one of the most, so ITU, intensive treatment unit. And it's something we discuss a lot when we're sentencing people. And I would say probably the most sought after and needed, and something that's just, I mean, something that's absolutely intertwined with the criminal justice system is substance abuse issues. And then when there's that bottlenecking in order to get treatment, what we see is if somebody has a lower sentence, let's say somebody gets a 2 to 4, they're going in, they might not be able to get into the ITU and get that intensive. So that would be, you know, like your 3-5 or your higher level of substance abuse treatment, because they don't have time, because by the time they go in, and there's a bottleneck on the program, they can't even receive the treatment. And so I know that's something that's really important, I think, for recidivism rates and to address. So I guess something I didn't realize, good unintended consequences. And again, a reason that I would commend the director, so to have multiple angles, I guess, of improvement is what it seems like to me via this restructuring, and at a cost reduction possibly, and certainly not a cost to the state, I think is exceptional. So everything at this point looks really good to me.
Representative Oakley, on page 3, lines 6 through 9, it talks about an application to the court for a reduction in sentence within 1 year after the individual being incarcerated, et cetera. Does the state have to agree to a reduction, or is that solely in the hands of the court? Do you know?
Chairman Olson, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Shannon, that is currently in statute. Did you say line 6 through 9?
Yeah, so it is, I'm looking at 6 through 9 because it's got some red.
Right,
language in
and
it. So what is-
basically the statute existed before, makes application to the court within 1 year. So I think as far as adding for a reduction in sentence is basically for language clarification, but that does, that currently does exist. And that is how, now again, I don't know if this is different, and Director Shannon could tell me, but basically when they were doing the boot camp, so as the director said, you get sentenced, the defendant would get sentenced to, let's say, a 5 to 10. Then they would complete the boot camp. Upon completion, they make an application to the court for a reduction in sentence, and then the judge can review for probation. So I think that's what that refers to, the making application to the court for a reduction in sentence. And I believe that's how it was before, so it would continue on that way, just I guess not this boot camp program, but this transition. Am I accurate there, Director Shannon?
Mr. Chairman,
Director Shannon?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, you are correct.
So that's just
Thank you.
clarifying, it's just clarifying language.
Mr. Chairman, it's
Yes.
clarifying between a sentence reduction and modification in sentence, yes.
Representative Washit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to mention, last year we had a bill, some of you may remember, that was trying to use individuals who didn't meet certification in substance abuse counseling within our prison system. This topic came up during the interim, and the department assured us that this was not a way to try and bypass the failure of that legislation last year, that these peer specialists are not the same kinds of fellows that we were talking about using for drug treatment counseling. This is a different approach.
Well, and Representative Washit, I actually liked that bill. Can't remember what I didn't like about it. There was just something about it that I couldn't get on board with. But
the counseling board folks didn't like it. They opposed it because it was going to create a different tier of substance abuse counselors within the state that didn't qualify to be substance abuse counselors outside of a prison. But they would only be allowed to work inside a prison.
I just remember I spent a lot of time crafting amendments for it, and I had a bunch of amendments ready, and then it didn't get past the first vote, so I could amend it. I was a little disappointed. Okay, but this is not, you're saying this is, they assured the committee during the interim that this is not some workaround for that bill.
That is correct.
Committee, other discussion on the bill? Okay. If there's no other discussion on the bill, then let's go ahead and work. Oh, what? Did you say question, Representative Zwanitzer?
I tried to, yes, Mr. Chairman.
You need to slow down 1 second. We got to work this bill. So this one's a little more fun, guys, because it has a few more pages. So the only thing I think, what I'll do is just to get us in a good habit, I'm just going to pass through the bill, even though the only thing I know that we talked about that may have an amendment would be in the enactment date, but just to get you into the flow of what we would traditionally do. And so what I would do is go to the bill and ask if there are any amendments on page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Oh, Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wonder if at the bottom of page 3, the last line of typing, which is line 22, if we should insert the words after he or she, just to make it clear that we're expanding the program to include, I mean, I know it already includes females to some degree, but that might make it more clear and remind us when we're talking about this on the floor that we are also talking about female inmates. I would propose that amendment so long as we don't mess up some definition elsewhere within the statutes.
I'm waiting for Representative Zwanitzer to, this is a age-old, you're going to second it. Okay. Got a second on that. And so discussion on it. And I don't know, maybe Representative Oakley, you could help us with this since you deal with criminal statutes all day long, and I stay as far away from criminal statutes all day long and criminal courts as I can. But isn't it, it's my understanding that that's probably, that language of the use of the male pronoun is consistent in how we write our criminal law. So we say he throughout the criminal law, or is this more of an anomaly? Do you know?
Chairman Olson, there is he used an awful lot. And there also is a person is used a lot. I don't think, and I could be wrong, LSO might have something to say, but I mean, it certainly doesn't, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong or offend me to add or she, not that offend me, but you know what I mean? I don't think we get into any murky waters legally by adding it. Like I say, just wait till LSO tells me why I'm wrong with that. But, I just pulled out Title 6. I see a person a lot. And then, then he does X, Y, and Z. Like I say, one at a time, I don't think I wouldn't oppose adding or she there, especially since we're kind of expanding this program as it relates to females.
Maybe not a criminal statute, but a statute that says that clarifies the use of a pronoun in our statutes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's 81103.
Do you have that pulled up, Representative Zwanitzer? By chance, or you just know that off the top of your head? What is it? What does it say?
81103 is the rules of statutory construction for all of our bills. For previous members, we've had several discussions and several bill drafts trying to change gender language and have had riveting discussions over the years. So I just remember it's in 81103 somewhere. But those are the rules of construction, and I think it's V. No, let's see, hold on, future tense. It's VI 6. Words in the masculine gender include the feminine and neuter genders.
Okay, so
81103.
perfect. Thank you, Representative Wanser. So I knew that was there somewhere. And so then I only bring that up, not that it influences your vote or my vote, but just that I'm 100% confident that if you pass this amendment, that the question that you'll get on the floor, we'll get on the floor is just that, right? Well, isn't there a statute that covers that? So just so everyone's aware that there is a statute. Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree with Chairman Olson is you will. So when we pass a committee amendment, it will show up on the floor as a committee amendment that the whole floor votes on for our new members. And that will be the number one opposition will be our rules of statutory construction allow us to use he. What I would recommend if we want to make it unambiguous would just be replace he with the inmate or the person and remove the pronoun altogether. And I do feel that would get less resistance on the floor and as well as, have less ambiguity between whether it's a he or she when we were talking about inmates in this program.
Sounds like an attempt at a friendly amendment. Representative Yin, Representative Craigo, would you consider it friendly to your motion?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I don't consider it unfriendly. Here, let me give you a little bit of background of why I was proposing the amendment. I know that the word he applies to all people in the state of Wyoming within the statute that as it's written. My thought was so when we first we're looking at these amendments to the statute and the changing in the program, we'd heard that the program would be now encompassing females within the state of Wyoming. Well, if you read through the amendments as they're written within the statute, there is no reference to male/female at all. I mean, by reading the amendments, you would not know that we are now including women within our females, young females within our boot camp program. We would only know that by listening to Director Shannon as we have today. And so that was my only thought is it gives us a little bit of a compass, so to speak, when we start talking to everybody else. If it creates more problems than it's worth when we get to the floor, I think we can explain that away. It was more of us being able to explain to not only on the floor, but to the public in general, that this program is what we're doing is we're changing a lot of things. And one of them is we're going to have our own boot camp for young females within the state of Wyoming.
Well, that's a really good point, actually, Representative Craigo, because, and I don't know, maybe Director Shannon, you would have to answer this. Obviously the original, I'm having a hard time finding where this change would occur in this bill, but wouldn't the original statute say the qualifications of boot camp? And then under the qualifications, it's going to say not more than or between the ages of 18 and 25, male, and go through a list. Is that accurate, Director Shannon? Where does the male qualification for boot camp come from? Is that in statute?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm not aware of that is in the current statute. It doesn't specify gender.
So it's just a product of there was a boot camp, there was a facility, and there was a decision somewhere made that we would sentence males to this boot camp. And then once we had so many males, we couldn't sentence the females to that boot camp because we didn't want to house them in the same place. But then we did sentence them to the boot camp. And then we moved them out of the state.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would prefer not to answer that question because of potential issues. But if so, I will submit it to you in writing.
No, Director Shannon, I know the answer. So I'm not going to walk you through troubled waters then. because Representative Craigo, what I'm thinking is, I mean, if that's what you want to do, I guess you could do it multiple ways. You could change line 22 on page 3, but you could also insert a paragraph here to the statute under establishment of program eligibility, and you could actually just create a section that says what the eligibility is. And you could say, like I just said, because I don't know where this is, but I thought the testimony was we're going to expand it to 30. So we could define that, or we could leave it up to DOC to define that, but that may, not that would happen under Director Shannon, but that could get us in troubled waters. So if we define it, that it is any male or female under the age of 30, then that may answer your desire to make that clear. Because the qualifications for this program, Director Shannon, are not in statute. Well, just the physicality portion on page 4, lines 4 through 7, but outside of the physicality portion, it's not defined.
Mr. Chairman, age is defined.
Where is that?
Under Romanet 2, line 2, where it says we included 30 under page 4. The old statute said 25.
Okay.
A resolution may be if we just use the word offender or inmate. That's gender neutral, and it would combine all of those confined within Department of Corrections.
Yeah, so I'll defer to you, Representative Craigo, because I understand that to be a resolution that we could just say person, offender, and that appears throughout statute and would be consistent. But I understand Representative Craigo, beyond the testimony that we're hearing right now, wants to convey to our chamber, okay, this was a program that wasn't fully available to both genders, and now it is. And beyond us saying that, which we can just say that, and if you make this amendment on page 3 to offender, when you present the amendment, we can say that. Representative Craigo, what is your pleasure? It's your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is one of the beauties of being a newbie, is you don't understand that trying to add the words or she to a statute just might create havoc when we get to the chamber. So, I mean, I understand from a lawyer's perspective that the word he is not going to affect the ability of Director Shannon to do what he wants to do. And it's not going to have any substantive change on the statute. And so if Representative Zwanitzer is okay with it, I would just withdraw my motion, and we would just deal with it on the floor and make sure whoever carries the bill on the floor, has that instruction for the chamber that one of the main things we're really trying to do is create an opportunity to bring those young female inmates back in state and save money by doing so.
So do you want to withdraw it, or do you want to amend your amendment to offender?
I would be fine with just withdrawing it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and you're okay with that, Representative Zwanitzer? And I'm okay with that because it's one last amendment that I have to present on the floor. But I will say, Representative Craigo and others interested could ask Representative Zwanitzer, or I don't think you were present at the Sundance Massacre.
Oh, I was.
You were. So if you're curious of what this really means and how it can really become a very broad and long conversation, both with the legislature and the public, ask Representative Zwanitzer about the Sundance Massacre.
Killed 6 bills in a row that day once people got fired up. Yeah.
All right. So we're avoiding the Cheyenne Massacre on our bills. Okay. Amendments, page 3, page 4, page 5. All right, Ryan, you're up. Go ahead and take the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. The vote is on House Bill 34, Youthful Offender Program Amendments. Representative Craigo.
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Oakley,
Aye.
Representative Provenza,
Aye.
Representative Rodriguez Williams,
Aye.
Representative Washit,
Aye.
Representative Yin,
Aye.
Representative Zwanitzer,
Aye.
and Chairman Olson.
Aye.
Motion passes 9-0, Mr. Chairman.
All right, good job, committee. And thank you, Director Shannon. Always a pleasure. Appreciate you. Wishing you all of the best and the best luck in your endeavor to accomplish the goals for the state of Wyoming that you're seeking.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for your time and consideration today. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, committee. And with that, we have 2 bills remaining. And one of them I think is a really simple bill, and that's that theft. The next one up is the theft statute amendment. We're right on schedule. We're maybe just a few minutes off of the schedule in my brain, but I think we're going to make up. We're not going to end behind. I was just thinking we may actually end at 5 o'clock instead of 5:30 when I built the agenda. So we're well on track. But what I'd like to do, committee, is just take a brief break. And it's 3:47 right now. So we'll be back at 4 o'clock. And during that break time, get refueled, obviously, but whatever you want to do. But the most important thing is keep your mic off and turn off your camera. Ryan, anything before the break that we need to know?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's it.
Okay. So with that, we'll see you at 4 o'clock, and turn off your cameras. Okay, welcoming back the committee. Give just a second here as folks filter back in from the much needed break. And we're back. All right, committee. With that, let's move to our next piece of legislation, which is House Bill 35, theft statute amendments. On deck, we have I believe the Prosecutors Association. Is that Mr. John Worrell, Ryan?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. We can go ahead and bring him, promote him to a panelist, and he can present to the committee. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you for that. And John, we've admitted you now. We see that you're here. The question is, can you see us? Can you hear us? Because I can't see you.
I can hear you, Mr. Chairman, but I don't see my picture up there either. But
Aha, that may be intentional on your part, or it may be unintentional.
to be really honest, it's probably Mr. Frost that did it because I ain't very good looking, so it's fine.
We can send you a little turn on your camera reminder. I just have to find it. Ask to start video.
Here, I got it.
There you go.
Magic.
All right.
Hi.
Welcome to the committee. And I understand this is, you can introduce yourself to the committee, but I do understand this is a new post for you.
It is relatively new. I was elected president of the Prosecutors Association, Mr. Chairman, in September. I've been involved with the organization. I'm in my 6th year as a prosecutor. So since that time, I was vice president of the organization for 2 years prior to being elected president.
Well, congratulations on your new role and your new responsibility to deal with us sometimes unwieldy legislators.
Well, thank you.
And this bill, House Bill 35 theft statute, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but it was where this committee left off was with your predecessor conversing with the committee on the bill. But if you would please just give us a little bit of to the extent you can, I'm assuming you'll be able to give us an introduction on why this bill returned to us and what it does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Before I begin my remarks, I wanted to say I've been watching you since you started at 1:30, and unlike what I thought it was going to be, which is sausage being made, I'm actually quite impressed with this committee and its breadth of knowledge and the various things that each and every one of you bring to the table. When everybody was struggling to find out the masculine and the feminine pronoun gender thing, I was sitting there screaming at the screen going, Title 8, Title 8. Representative Zwanitzer rescued you right off the bat. And that's just like jury's work. So it's a really good thing. You have a great committee here. I'm impressed.
Thank you, John. I'm really glad to hear that, and I'm sure they appreciate you telling them that as well. And just one of the great things about being in the Capitol, one day, I pray that we will soon be there, is that when we are in the committee meeting and you're hanging out in the room, and when you are getting ready to scream Title 8, I can see you and I can actually call on you and say, John, you know this title. Tell us where it's at. And we're just so much more efficient when we're in person for what you just pointed out, we have all hands on deck. So I'll look forward to that day.
It's fun to watch it work. If you're ready, Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and proceed.
Yeah, please proceed.
Okay, thank you all. The input of the association on this bill has been, to begin with, when you affected the changes last year to consolidate all of those theft crimes, or the lion's share of them at least, into one statute. We had the beginnings of this, which had 63402A and then Romanet 1, 2, and 3. And there was no conjunctives between them. I ran into this argument just the other day in a case with a former prosecutor who just left the Campbell County Attorney's Office and was defending a case against me. And he raised the issue that number 3 created additional elements for that entire statute. The reason that you're putting the word "or" in the amendment proposes the word "or" to go in. And it's a very appropriate thing to do. I can tell you that the circuit judges primarily, but as well the district judges, through the Board of Judicial Policy and Administration, have also determined that the plain meaning of this statute did not intend to make Romanet 3 additional elements. Nonetheless, clarity is important, and the addition of the word "or" is completely supported by the association. I do want to recommend one possible change, and I'll explain why, and then I'll be done. You can get going with the rest of your meeting. But the change is, I think you should add "or" after Romanet 1 as well. And they haven't added it after Romanet 2, but if you add it after Romanet 1, it creates 3 distinct possibilities that are additional elements to the primary body of the statute in the beginning of subparagraph A. The reason that's important is because A1 or A Romanet 1 creates a specific intent crime, and A Romanet 2 creates a general intent crime. Now, your 2 prosecutors on your committee here, Representatives Oakley and Crago, can tell you much better than I probably how prosecutors generally don't like to see specific intent crimes come along if there's a general that doesn't fit it, because it's much easier to prove. It's also not a good idea, in my estimation, to mix specific intent elements with general intent elements in a statute and make them all elements of the same crime, because it can become very confusing and very difficult and creates all kinds of landmines to step on. So I would recommend the addition of another "or" after Romanet number 1. And that's all I would have to say. I'm open for questions if you care to ask any, Mr. Chairman.
Well, yeah, maybe it's helpful to back up just a little bit for the committee here, because this, so everyone understands, and maybe I'm sure you familiarized yourself with the history of this legislation and probably tracked it last session, but some of our members are newer, and so they did not see this bill 1 year ago. And so the Romanets that you're referencing, for example, they're not in our bill, they're obviously in the statute, and they were considered during the previous discussion on this legislation. But maybe just back us up a little bit so that all of our members know the history here, because 1 year ago we undertook an endeavor to amend the theft statutes, John, and then maybe you just tell us what if you know what we amended then, and then
sure.
And then it's just basically a Scrivener's, we'll call it a Scrivener's error, because the legislature doesn't make mistakes, but just a Scrivener's error, and we left an "or" out, is my understanding.
That would be true. I do have quite a bit of knowledge about this, because for the last 2 years, I was the chair of the legislative committee of our association. And it's been a hobby of mine prior to that to follow legislation and hang on to my wallet while you all are in session. So just wanted to throw that in there. But yes, I can give you a brief history. The idea behind this bill was to consolidate as many of the theft crimes as possible, so there weren't so many different little separate places for people to commit different kinds of crimes, and more generalize the application of those. I think, let's see, 63403 was repealed effective July 1 of 2020. That's your last iteration of this bill. That also took care of shoplifting, which was repealed. Defrauding an innkeeper was repealed. Obtaining property by false pretenses, and these are in order in the former statute books, is 63403, 405, 6, and 7. That's true of theft of services, 408, 409, fraudulently obtaining telecommunication services. 410, the value of property can be aggregated. That's taken care of in the earlier statute. I could go on. There's quite a few others, but the point of the exercise is to bring all of those statutes under one title and simplify the application. At least I think this is the goal. And I see Ms. Shippens on the phone, are on this call, so she might be able to speak to this too, as well as Ryan Frost. But the goal was to consolidate as many of these theft crimes into one place and simplify the application of the law. Sometimes in that, when you're pulling a piece out of this statute or a piece out of this statute, which is what these Romanettes essentially represent, you once in a while will run across, as you put it, Mr. Chairman, a scrivener's error. And the bill that's presently before you, the amendment to this statute, is intended to correct one of those errors, which is to not make Romanet 3 an additional element to the rest of that crime. I'm suggesting that Romanets 1, 2, and 3 are all separate ways that the crime of theft can be charged. And as a result, you need to differentiate between all three of them, which is my recommendation for adding another or after Romanet 1.
Okay, thanks, John. That's really helpful. And we don't have, our bill draft doesn't show us those Romanettes. Can you walk us through? So just walk us through. What is number 1? Let's start with Romanet number 1.
Okay, it will help you to understand that what goes before it.
Sure.
This is all in subparagraph A. It states that a person is guilty of theft if he knowingly takes, obtains, procures, retains, or exercises control over, or makes an unauthorized transfer of an interest in the property of another person without authorization, or by threat, or by deception, or he receives, loans money by pawn, or pledge on, or disposes of the property of another person that he knew or reasonably should have known was stolen. And then it goes on to say, semicolon or comma, and he, colon, Romanet 1, intends to deprive the other person of the use or benefit of the property, semicolon, Romanet 2, knowingly uses, receives, conceals, abandons, or disposes of the property in such a manner as to deprive the other person of its use or benefit. A car gets stolen in Worland and dropped off in Cheyenne, and the defendant disappears to Nebraska, something like that. And number 3, demands anything of value to which he has no legal claim as a condition for returning or otherwise restoring the property to the other person. Those are the 3, says and he, so the first part is important to understand, and then each of those 3 Romanettes stands for a different way that one can commit the crime of theft. And so all I'm asking is to make sure that they're all delineated as separate ways that one can prove that crime.
Okay, and you said you tracked this this particular bill through the process in 2020?
Correct.
Because as I recall, the at least at some point, the bill did contain the word or after Romanet 1. Did it not?
It may have. I mean, as you well know, sometimes following these things through the legislature, those changes happen and are removed the same day. So unless you're following it minute by minute, it is oftentimes impossible to track that, unless one, of course, one is a legislator and has access to all that stuff.
So I think at one point, the bill said, is going back to A, because we're looking at 63402 theft penalties. The person is guilty of theft if he, Romanet I, so forth. And then it said, or Romanet 2, and he, or that's where we ended, I think, maybe. We ended with an and. Is that what we're changing? Or there's nothing after Romanet 2 right now?
That's correct. That is correct, Mr. Chairman. The and he appears at the beginning, at the end of the original subparagraph A, and then it's followed by a colon, and then there's the 3 Romanettes, which are the separate ways that one can do that.
Okay, yeah, now I'm starting to remember why that and he ends on what we see on our bill as page 2, line 2, but ends at the end of Romanet A, or at the end of paragraph A, because the bill originally said a person is guilty of theft if he, and then Romanet I, so forth, or Romanet 2 and he, so forth, all the paragraphs, subparagraphs, et cetera, and then Romanet 3. And I think what happened in the amendment was to take the and he out after Romanet 2, move it up to A. So I'm just trying to walk myself back through that original, maybe Representative Ian, you can help me recall
Yeah,
how
Mr.
we
Chairman,
got from Ann's.
in the introduced bill of HB 16 in 2020, there was a Romanet 4. And so after Romanet 3, there was an or. And then at some time it was amended, one of the Romanets was amended out, and no one remembered to put an or in the amendment process to fix it. So I think that is what happened. Mr.
Right,
Chair.
okay. I'm just trying to understand if what John's request for another or between Romanet 1 and 2 was ever originally contemplated by this committee or our committee of the whole. Do you know,
Mr. Chairman,
Representative?
you know what? My thought is that LSO probably thinks that based on how we lay out our statutes, that it's not necessary to have a second or. One or means all of them are or.
Oh, very interesting. Okay. John, would you legally concur with that interpretation?
I think that that's a reasonable assumption on the part of Representative Yin. Yes, I do. And I considered that before I even brought this to your attention.
But you don't get your fingerprint on the bill if that happens.
No, I don't care about my fingerprints on a bill, Mr. Chair. What I do care about is my job as a prosecutor, which is made more simple if each of those is specifically delineated. And no one is then showing up making what I would deem to be spurious arguments that somehow or another Romanet 2 is an additional element to Romanet 1. Okay. If they're made clear that each of those is a separate thing, then that's why. And I'll point out to you, because while you were bringing that up, I brought up the old version of the statute, just theft penalties. Okay, theft and penalties, and that's 63402. Virtually all of A is preserved. And then the rest of it is all moved down. And the Romanets that follow in the new statute, the one that you already passed, were added on as part of combining the rest of those things in. And I think that is supported by Representative Yin's recollection insofar as when you take and combine all those things. And I do agree. I think it's probably not necessary, but it certainly for me and for a lot of my members would add some clarity. And I don't think it would cause any harm. I don't think it changes the meaning. That's all I have.
Representative Washit, you're desperately trying to get that question in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Worrell, I appreciate you being here today. And I think Representative Yin is correct that when we took that part 4 out, then we had didn't put the or back in, as simple as that. Mr. Worrell, my question for you is, in total, with the exception of this Scribner's error, has the revamp of the theft statute been generally beneficial and positive in your mind, or did we do something worse than we had before?
I don't think excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Representative Washit, I got to do this properly. I always forget the decorum here. I apologize. But I think generally it works pretty good. The one issue that I am concerned about is the mixture of the specific and the general intent, and the possibility of saying that those are two elements of the same crime, which is then two different ways to prove it and two different jury instructions for why. So it's a convenience measure for me. I'm pretty sure Representative Oakley and Representative Crago would support the idea of convenience. They may not agree with what I'm saying here, and they're probably smarter than I am. But I do think that for the most part, the consolidation of the theft statute has worked. I will tell you that these statutes that were repealed were still in effect when some crimes that are crossing my desk were committed. So now I'm back in the old statute books looking up how to plead them. And that's why I know where this one is, because I was just looking it up the other day. But generally, I'd say yes, it has been beneficial. And it's certainly easier to find your way through the statutes, which has always been a challenge in Wyoming.
That's a no follow-up from Representative Washit. Representative Oakley, did you have your hand up? No. Thought someone maybe on the right side of my, oh, it was Representative Provenza. You had your hand up on the right side of my screen with Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was just going to echo what Representative Yin said from the meeting notes during the interim in October. Judiciary did consider this. Representative Jennings at the time brought it, and Brian Fuller with LSO said that it applies. It's the penultimate qualifier. So that was the language that they used in terms of saying what the or wasn't needed, but that was all I had.
Oh, so I understand that, Representative Provenza, you're saying that Representative Jennings brought an amendment to add the or, and that's what LSO said?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if Representative Jennings brought an amendment. To my recollection, I know that there was a question posed by Representative Jennings and that Brian Fuller was able to answer that during that meeting, and ultimately the committee walked away from it.
The beauty is that Mr. Fuller is listening to our meeting. So if we run astray with that, he'll probably light up on the screen and let us know that it was covered. Okay. Other questions, committee? Representative Crago.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Worrell, I just had a quick question on the word knowingly. And if you look at the statute in subparagraph A, person is guilty of theft if he knowingly takes, right? So we have the word knowingly. And then we go to Romanet 2, and then the word knowingly is used again. Do we create, and I'm just thinking from a practical standpoint, jury instructions, pleading, etc. Do we have to prove knowingly twice?
Mr. Worrell, do we have a new mens rea, knowingly?
Well, it would be like a joke I heard on TV once that we're all Republicans here, so we'll do a deal. Okay, so it's knowingly. And that's probably not completely fair, but I think it's redundant at a minimum, Representative Crago. So I agree with you. I would say if one took that knowingly out, you certainly had to prove it as part of the main body of what you have to prove. And then as this separate particular crime, a general intent crime, I might add, you shouldn't have to prove it twice. So yes, I believe that would be an appropriate amendment as well. And I would agree with you along those lines.
Mr. Worrell, because I don't have that darn Romanet 1 in front of me. Does it start the same way? Does it start with knowingly? No?
Excuse me, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Chairman. No, it starts intends to deprive the other person of the use or benefit of the property. And the next one, that's in Romanet 1.
Okay, and does Romanet 3 have a mens rea at the beginning of it?
No, it does not, other than it says demands anything of value, etc.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm tracking with you 100%, Representative Crago. It definitely is duplicative. But Representative Washit, what say you?
What say I is that perhaps you want to explain mens rea to the non-lawyers in the committee.
Who you asking?
I'm the chairman, so I get a call on Mr. Worrell.
Okay, it basically means state of mind.
Lawyers like to use Latin, so we pretend like we know something that we don't, that somebody else doesn't know. Other questions for Mr. Worrell? If not, Representative Oakley?
Thank you, Chairman Olson. Mine's more discussion along with that rather than a question for Mr. Worrell. So perhaps.
Well, perhaps that will be, if it's not a question for Mr. Worrell, perhaps it will be better suited for discussion on the bill. Mr. Worrell, any other thoughts or anything you think we need to know before what I'm going to do next is get the WTLA testimony. So it looks like Ms. Lance will be on deck for that, I'm assuming.
Mr. Chairman, no, I do not. I believe I've said what I need to say. Thank you. Okay, perfect. But if you're available, you please stick around. We'll bring Ms. Lance in. We'll see what she has to say about the bill, and if necessary, we'll bring up the discussion of whatever you've talked about, and it may circle back to you. So if you're around, we'd love to have you stick around for just a few more minutes. I can do that. Thank you.
All right. Welcome, Ms. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's nice to see you all newly assembled, even though it is unfortunately over Zoom and not in person. But my name is Beth Lance. I am here today on behalf of the Wyoming Trial Lawyers Association. We have reviewed this bill and the simple change that exists right now, which is adding the or. We don't have any heartburn about that or any concerns actually with adding that. It probably does clarify, although potentially unnecessary. And just to speak towards the conversation about the two knowinglys, I would agree as well as an attorney that probably removing that knowingly from moment at 2 would also help to clarify this statute. But I would be happy to take any questions if anyone had questions.
That was going to be my question on what you thought of the knowingly. I mean, it would be a fun defense.
It would, definitely. It could be creative.
Committee, questions for Ms. Lance? Excellent. Well, if you and your association have no heartburn with adding the or, despite it sounds like it may be, you said it may be unnecessary, but if you have no heartburn, and I think we're probably going to have an amendment to remove knowingly, that makes the most amount of sense. So I think we're all tracking.
Great. Yeah, I think we would be in agreement with all that.
Excellent. Well, Ms. Lance, thank you for stopping in and same with you, Mr. Worrell. I think that's probably it on testimony. So appreciate both of you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate being here.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm usually available if you need me.
Great. Well, if we don't need you before then, hopefully we'll see you in person in March if we can meet in person.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Great. Ryan, any other public testimony on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see anybody with their hand raised in the attendees list, so I don't believe there's any further public comment.
Very good. Committee, what is your pleasure? Representative Washington.
Move the bill.
It's been moved and seconded by Representative Provenza. Discussion on the bill. And now Representative Oakley would be a great time for discussion points.
We're discussing one part of it and I can't remember at this point what I was going to say. So I withdraw my hand raising.
That's fine. I just did not want you to feel left out or silenced by any means. Okay. Any discussion on the bill, committee? No discussion. All right. Oh, Representative Orson. You're muted.
I see that. Am I on now?
Please, yes.
I think so. Yeah, I'm ready for that amendment. Maybe get rid of that knowingly on the number 2.
On page 2, line 4. So it's been
make
moved
that motion.
Excellent, thank you. Moved by Representative Larson and seconded by Representative Washit. Discussion on the amendment?
Question.
Everyone understand the amendment? All right, all those in favor of the amendment signify by raising your hand. All right, and all those opposed, raise your hand. Okay, 9-0. So we'll make note of that amendment to remove the extra knowingly. And as we figured
Question
out,
on the bill.
Representative Washit.
I'd like to amend for the sake of clarity and go ahead and put that or after Romanet 1.
Okay, moved by Representative Washit. Do we have a second? Oakley, Representative Oakley, second. Discussion on the amendment. And that's not in our bill, but I'm sure LSO can figure out exactly what we're talking about. Discussion on this amendment. Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, could we have LSO comment on that?
That would be my, Representative Larson, yeah, it would be my preference to. I've been advised that our attorney is available. We're supposed to exercise great caution in utilizing our attorney. However, given my understanding of what Representative Provenza said, which is that, and Ryan may be able to speak to this himself when we not have to use our attorney, but given what Representative Provenza said, that this exact discussion took place during the interim, and given that I was not chairman or present during that meeting, I would appreciate if LSO could weigh in on this. Ryan, I know you were not staffing the committee at that time, so you probably can't weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll see if I can't weigh in. I was not present at that meeting. I can see if somebody from LSO Legal is available.
That would be great. Let's see if we can find an LSO legal beagle.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Larson, I'm sorry, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any way with our most had the most years, maybe Representative Swanitzer could comment on this? I don't know if he has any comments.
He certainly can, although I do see our attorney, who staffs this committee, Mr. Fuller, lit up. Maybe Mr. Fuller, you could speak to the necessity of this amendment.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Brian Fuller. I'm one of the attorneys at the Legislative Service Office. For those of you who don't know me, generally, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in terms of a conjunction, it usually is only on the penultimate item. I'm unaware of other statutes, and there may be other provisions in statute that have that. But the court has generally interpreted that final or at the penultimate to mean that each of those are exclusive and not inclusive of each other.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. And Representative Zwanitzer, as a senior most member of our chamber, you've probably seen this discussion a lot.
We have had the discussion before, Mr. Chairman, on grammar and juxtaposition of semicolons and commas, and I would agree with Mr. Fuller. I don't always think that the way Wyoming historically has done statutory construction is correct, but I fought some battles over the years on things like the Oxford comma, and we do it how we historically have done it for the past century.
Thank you, Representative Zwanitzer. I personally am a fan of the Oxford comma. Representative Washit, sensing a feeling to withdraw the amendment?
Withdraw the amendment.
Thank you. Okay. Well, that was a great, nevertheless, it was a good discussion. So I appreciate the discussion, Representative Washit, and appreciate, assuming the second is okay with the withdrawal, Representative Oakley. Then any other
question?
No other amendments on the bill? Amendments on the bill? Sensing the extreme urgency by Representative Larson to vote on the bill, we will proceed to vote on the bill. Ryan.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, you're voting on House Bill 35, Theft Statute Amendment. as amended. Representative Craigo,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Oakley,
Aye.
Representative Provenza,
Aye.
Representative Rodriguez Williams,
Aye.
Representative Washit,
Aye.
Representative Yin,
Aye.
Representative Zwanitzer,
Aye.
and Chairman Olson.
Aye.
Motion passes 9-0, Mr. Chairman.
Look at that. All right. With that, we'll move to our next piece of legislation and our final piece of legislation. I told you you'd get out of here by 5 o'clock, folks. House Bill 31, Board of Coroner Standards Investigation Authority. And we do have, this one we're going to do a little bit different than what we've been doing, because my understanding of this legislation was that we unfortunately did not receive testimony when it was originally introduced by the Coroners Association. We will, I believe we may receive some testimony from them today, but before we get to that point, let's go ahead and introduce the bill. And I'm going to ask Representative Washit, Vice Chairman Washit, don't want to put you on the spot, but you were present. You were present when we heard this bill. If you want to give us a little introduction on the bill, kick us off, and then we'll bring in the testimony. That would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to. The bill arises out of a case out of Teton County where there was dispute about how the coroner had dealt with a particular unattended death. And there was an attempt to get the Coroner's Standards Board to do a review of the case and overrule the county coroner. And it was then litigated. So it came to us on this question of whether or not the Coroner Standards Board should have or does have jurisdiction to conduct an inquiry into the performance of a coroner somewhere in the state. And that's what this bill attempts to do.
Thank you, Representative Washit. It's Ryan, who I have on my list from our association. I don't see in our attendees list. Maybe that's been changed, or is this by phone?
Mr. Chairman, he is here by phone, and I can unmute him if you're ready for him to testify now.
And this is, yeah, that's fine. This is Mr. Mark Stratum from the Fremont County Coroner and President of the Wyoming Coroners Association. We're welcome, Mark. Feel free to, unmute.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, thank you. Feel free to introduce yourself to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mark Stratmon. I'm the Fremont County Coroner, and I'm president of the Wyoming Coroners Association. Just a little background on some of this. I was on the working group that came up with the originating board legislation and that created the coroner standards. Years ago at the time, this sort of power was considered. And at that time, the general opinion in the legislature was a certain reluctance to give an executive branch appointed board this sort of authority over a set of publicly elected officials. That opinion may have changed, of course, by now, and you'll have to check with your peers on that one. I would comment that the standards in the rules are there as a guide and a very generalized way due to the differences between the large and small counties as far as capabilities and finances for the coroner agencies. In other words, there's a lot of leeway in the standards interpretations. There is no definition of misconduct in the standards as far as investigations go. my other comment would be that it's not unusual for persons or families in our business to not like or agree with a ruling, regardless of the facts, the evidence, or investigations by our office and law enforcement. This often is due to an emotional inability to accept a death rather than misconduct. My concern is that while appearing to be a good idea, this bill opens up a wealth of unintended consequences and possible legal expenses for the county. And Representative Oakley may be able to answer this question a little better, but I would note that the county attorney generally in a procedure would have to represent the coroner before a board hearing, which would complicate something if the board decides to refer it back to the county attorney if there is some sort of a finding of misconduct. Finally, the comments that I've received as association president from the coroners generally are not in favor of this bill. My personal opinion is that this may be a good idea, but to properly do this is a lot more complicated than is addressed in this bill. As an example, the board would have to do further rulemaking in order to have a procedure, the qualifications for considerations of complaints, and the definitions of misconduct. And I'm available for any questions.
Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, absent this ability for the standards board to review, where were the case where there's a dispute like this, the one we had in Teton County, where would that end up? Would that end up in litigation in the district court without an administrative review opportunity?
Mr. Stratman?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, in the case of the Teton County, there was also another lawsuit regarding the court's ability to review a decision, and both the district court and the Wyoming Supreme Court upheld that the courts had no authority to review a coroner decision in this regard.
Representative Washington, does that answer your question?
It does. It raises some concerns. It certainly raises concerns. So maybe this is something that needs more work.
Representative Provenza, was your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, to add some information to Representative Washit's question, my understanding is that the Senate Judiciary met yesterday and considered Senate File 21, I believe, which is meant to expand judicial powers on kind of looking into this issue here. I'm not entirely, I don't know what the outcome was if they got to it yesterday and what ended up happening with it, but my understanding is there's a bill up now for that.
Other questions for Mr. Stratman? If not, I have a few then. And my first question is just honing in a little more specifically on your association. Your comment was that the coroners, the folks that have submitted comment to you in your association generally are not in favor of it. Did your association take a vote on the bill by chance, or do you even do that? I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, that was just email responses. We did not take a formal vote on that, and I did not get responses from all 23 of the coroners.
That was going to be my follow-up question. There are 20, you have 23 members, and how many responses did you receive?
4 or 5, that's about it.
Okay. My next question to clarify is under, you said to properly do this, you would need rulemaking authority to clarify which two, what you said two things, and what was that to clarify?
Mr. Chairman, the current standards and rules that the board went through the rulemaking process several years ago do not include any definition of misconduct, and there also is no rules or procedures as to how they would handle this if they were given this authority. And in order to do that, I believe they would have to go through the rulemaking process to have an established procedure. Otherwise, they could be challenged as to what they're following and why they're doing it, I would suppose.
Very good. Potentially an easy fix, just amendment to the bill to give you rulemaking authority to do such, I think. Would that be your understanding as what would clarify that for you?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I do believe, just like the statutes gave them authority to create rules and standards, it would need to have some sort of authority to further create rules in order to develop a procedure if you're going to authorize them to have this authority.
Okay, that's helpful. Representative Washit, I saw your hand go up.
Thank you. Two quick things. One, I looked at Senate File 21, and that was a bill dealing with venue and allowing litigation over agency actions to be heard in the jurisdiction in which the harm occurred or where the party might reside, rather than having to have those agency hearings in Laramie County. So I don't think that addressed this particular issue. And the other point I had on this bill was, what legal counsel is available to the Coroner Standard Board? Would the Attorney General's office be available to guide them and assist them as they conducted these types of hearings?
It's a great question, which I can answer in part, but I'll first go to Mr. Stratman. Do you have legal counsel? Does the association have a contract for legal counsel, or do you have, I doubt you have an attorney, but maybe a contract for one, or how does that work?
As far as the board meetings that I have attended, Mr. Chairman, at each board meeting, there is a designated attorney from the Attorney General's office that is there to assist. And that is also what happens when they do go through the rulemaking procedure.
Right, and so just to follow up there to make sure that's clear. So if we were to amend this bill to provide rulemaking authority with respect to the change in order to allow, I mean, we could define misconduct in statute, or we could defer to rulemaking authority to, I believe, to define misconduct, rules of procedure, things of that nature. Just to clarify, if we were to do that, just like any other agency, board, commission, that rulemaking process would be in conjunction with an attorney general assigned to your association. And then the rules would be ultimately submitted to the legislature for final approval, not the body, but having a hard time remembering. I guess there's an opportunity, it's not for final approval, but there's an opportunity for management council to object to the rulemaking. I think Representative Swanitzer, is that how rulemaking works? I'm trying to remember.
With a state agency.
Boards
yes,
and commissions too, right?
I'm not exactly, I know A&I has personnel which helps the boards and commissions with their rulemaking responsibilities and duties, but I assume it's the same process that goes before the AGs and Management Council, and we all approve them, and they have public comment and they follow the Administrative Procedures Act. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the process. And then because I've statutorily had bills that make changes to, I made a change to a commission once, and I remember that I gave them rulemaking authority. They changed their rules, and then as the sponsor of the bill, I received the rule changes and had the opportunity to object through Management Council if I wanted to. My guess is this committee would then receive the rules and have the opportunity to object through Management Council. Probably far more than anyone really wants to know or needs to know, but there's a process there anyway. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is it's Stratmoen? I'm sorry, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So does the board currently, so this language would say that the board would investigate these incidents or complaints of misconduct. Does the Board of Coroners currently have someone who can serve as an investigator in a meaningful way? Would they be able to investigate claims of misconduct?
Mr. Stratmoen.
The board currently has on its membership a law enforcement officer. Usually it's a sheriff. That's why I'm saying this is a little more complicated. Right now, the only authority they have is to recommend removal if a coroner is not certified by post, which is the only authority that they have as far as removing anybody. And that doesn't require any investigation because post keeps track of certifications and whether they're current or not. So there's no real capacity for the board or allowances for them to do this sort of investigation, which of course could fall under procedures also if they came up with them.
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Chairman Olson. Hello, Coroner Stratmoen. You just said there's no capacity to do that, but I mean, isn't that your understanding and exactly what we're working on correcting here? That opinion in regards to that Teton County case, specifically referring to Hayes versus the Board of Coroner Standards, specifically says there isn't the capacity to investigate and promulgate rules. And what we're looking at here under Romanet 8 gives that teeth so that the board could, looking directly from the words of the statute, investigate complaints of misconduct. And then it ends with, and so arguably a authorizing statute, or with the standards for investigating coroner's cases promulgated under this subsection. So I agree they currently don't have that, but again, isn't that specifically what we're looking to correct so that the board could oversee some of the coroner's actions?
Mr. Stratmoen.
Mr. Chairman, that still is a bit generalized, and I would be personally reluctant to give that sort of authority to a board without legislatively requiring them to make a procedure on what they do and how they do it. In other words, if you just give them the authority, then they can come up with whatever standards for investigation or procedures that they want to without any oversight. And I think if you're going to give a board this sort of authority, they need to be required to have procedures and rules as to how they're going to use it. That's mostly my opinion.
So as a follow-up, Mr. Stratmoen, maybe I'm now contemplating two amendments. One is to provide rulemaking authority, but number two would, to answer that, it sounds like we would just need an amendment to say that the rules, the procedure shall be conducted pursuant to the Administrative Procedures Act. Would that provide a sufficient procedure?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not that familiar with the details of the Administrative Procedure Act. I believe in the court rulings, that was one of the comments that the board didn't necessarily fall under that, and how the legislature would best resolve the issue of making sure there is a procedure is really up to you as legislators. I just think there needs to be some sort of protections for both, for all the parties involved, especially if you're talking about investigations of an elected official.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's two questions. One is, if we were to give this authority to the board and we give them rulemaking authority and we set forth something to deal with the procedures, I'm assuming that doing an investigation and holding a hearing and so forth would entail some costs. How do we make sure that the coroner's board gets the budget necessary to carry forth this mandate? And my second question is, I should know this, but I don't. Is there a mechanism in law for the removal of a coroner?
Mr. Stratmoen, do you know, maybe the second question is easier to start with. Do you know if there's a mechanism in law to remove a coroner?
Mr. Chairman, coroners as elected officials are subject to the same rules and regulations and procedures for removal as any of the other elected officials. I believe they're quite specified in statute. The only one that currently specifically is handled by the board is if a coroner is not certified by post, then it's referred to the Attorney General. But I mean, as an elected official, I'm subject to all the same limitations and ethics and everything else that any elected official is subject to by statute.
And Mr. Stratmoen, to the first part of the question, you know, we have a fiscal note that tells us there's no fiscal or personnel impact. Of course, that's, you know, that's as the bill is written, not as it may be written or could be written. Maybe because it sounds like, I mean, your answer is probably going to be yes, because there's a process that has to occur, and so it must have some type of impact. But maybe to clarify, can you tell us, is the board general fund funded?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not exactly sure, but because I haven't looked at the budgeting of that area in quite a while, but I believe that they get, like a lot of boards and commissions, that they get a yearly expenses for the costs of meetings and possibly for the use of the AG's office. I'm not sure on that part, though.
Can you, with beyond speculation, can you with any specificity speak to a fiscal impact that would occur if we provided rulemaking authority and you had to carry out investigations?
Mr. Chairman, from the when we did the rulemaking that established the standards in the first place, the only expenses were what was already allowed to the board for travel for meetings and that sort of thing, like any other board or commission. as far as the rulemaking process itself, I don't believe there was any expense because that goes through the normal Attorney General rulemaking process with public comments and all that sort of thing. But I don't know if that costs the AG's office anything or not. As far as, like I say, as far as the investigation end of it, that would be a whole new area for the board, and I would be reluctant to speculate on whether it would cost anything or not.
Do you have does your board have an executive director?
Mr. Chairman, there should be a president of the board. The board was recently, after some delay, new board members were appointed by Governor Gordon. The board is not completely filled. I believe there's at least one empty portion.
Well, let me ask it
So
this way.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, let me ask it this way. Does your board have any staff, any FTEs, employees or part-time employees?
No.
Okay. That's helping me, I think, understand. I'm searching as I'm talking, trying to look through the budget and look for how your board, what it receives. If it has no staff, I mean, it still may receive some general fund dollars, but if it has no staff, there's at least a pretty insignificant appropriation, if any. Representative Lorson.
Mr. Chairman, I'll wait to ask a question. Thank you.
Representative Washit.
Nothing further.
Okay, well, the good news is, we don't want you to speculate on what a cost would be if there were one. And of course, we would need to speculate on that either, because the good news is, suppose this committee were to amend it as such, there's always opportunity, of course, where I think that given that amendment, your board would be asked what the fiscal impact is and would have the opportunity to provide that information in forming the final fiscal impact statement. And of course, we'd have an opportunity to try to figure out what that cost may be. And, assuming there were a cost, I suppose, whatever it is, I suppose that's a policy question at the end of the day that the legislature would weigh in conjunction with testimony and support from your board and association, is whether whatever cost we spent to investigate the one complaint or the 20 complaints, who knows, is the cost worth it? I guess we don't know, but we don't have to speculate on the cost. We'll get a fiscal statement from you. I suppose we'll ask you for that if we have an amendment. Does your, I guess to clarify that, Mr. Stratmoen, do you recall if your board would have received a question during the interim regarding the fiscal impact that would occur to your board? And that's why we have a zero impact statement. Do you recall if your board discussed that? Or
Mr. Chairman, I'm not on the board, so I don't know if they received or answered that question.
Oh, I understand. Okay, thank you. Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for committee's information, 18.3.902 in statute gives the governor the authority to act on removal from office of county officials.
That's what Representative Larson, that's what you were going to tell us, huh? I knew it. Could read your mind. Any further questions? Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I probably ought to wait until we discuss the bill without asking questions.
Okay. Thank you. I'll remember that you want to discuss it then. Other questions for our guest? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Stratmoen. So it seems like right now the coroners are, at least the training and everything is under post, the Peace Officer Standards and Training Office, right? So there's an alternate route, you know, say we don't go with maybe the post board of coroners for this, of providing the powers to post to then oversee investigations, because they also investigate certifications of peace officers. What are your thoughts on if we change the statute so that it allowed for peace officer standards and training to take on this responsibility? Just
Mr. Stratmoen?
I think Post does a very good job with what they do. I'm not familiar with their investigative capabilities. They certainly, Post being Post, would be experienced investigators or have availability to get a hold of them. You know, I certainly wouldn't object to that sort of thing myself personally. But I really can't tell you the implications without asking Post.
Representative Provenza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Stratmoen. I understand that's a kind of an out of left field question. I just figured they were there, you know, maybe more ability to do this sort of thing. So thank you for answering my question.
Other questions? Committee? Seeing no questions, I would, at this time, I think we have, if I read the name right, Representative Ian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have Mr. Brent Blue, and he is from your county. Is that correct?
Dr. Blue is a county coroner for Teton County.
Dr. Blue is your coroner. Let's go ahead and let Dr. Blue in. And Mr. Stratmoen, we're you know, you're welcome to stick around, and we may circle back to you for any additional questions after we hear from Dr. Blue. Dr. Blue?
Yes, can you hear me?
We hear you, and we don't see you, but that may be intentional.
No, you can see me. I'm sorry. Chairman Olson and members of the committee, this legislation came out of an inquest in our county that I held in 2017. And that inquest was based on the fact that the witnesses to a death were unwilling to testify without being under oath. And we followed the procedure described in the statutes for the inquest. We were monitored by our county attorney to make sure that we did everything correct. We had 3 independent jurors that were selected, and they came out with a verdict. And the verdict is a finding of fact. It does not incriminate. It doesn't. It's just fact finding. And one of the individuals whose home the person died in disagreed with the fact-finding result from the jury, and that was the reason that he went to court, first the Supreme Court and then the Board of Coroners. I mean, personally, it didn't affect me in any way, but I mean, we followed the statutes as closely as we could. And I am the only physician who is a coroner in the state of Wyoming at the moment, and only the second coroner to be a physician in the entire state. So I was pretty strict about how we investigate, especially from the medical perspective, and this was a medical death. So it was a little disheartening to have a bill or have somebody complain about what we did, but it was basically just a difference of opinion. And that would be like somebody who was involved in a jury trial and didn't like the verdict. And I just don't see a lot of reason for this expense and what's going on here for this legislation. And I'm happy to accept any questions.
Well, Dr. Blue, probably a conversation for a complete different time, but you may intentionally or unintentionally have raised a subject that has been on my mind for many years, which is why our coroner standards don't require a particular medical background. And maybe that's certainly a topic for a different day, but maybe we'll have to chat sometime about your thoughts on that.
I would love to do that.
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Chairman Olson. Dr. Blue, I'm interested, you said that it was fact-finding, you know, there was a fact-finding journey. Was there not a forensic pathologist used in this case? Basically, you said it was a medical death. So my question is, why would the avenue of an inquest to have 3 citizens from Teton County be making the fact finding when in today's day and age there's forensic pathology to truly discover cause and manner of death?
In this Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, in this situation, it was a little bit more complex than that. This involved the use of illicit drugs and the failure to call 911 when there was a medical emergency, and that failure was because the homeowner did not want the police to come in and find 3 unconscious people in his home. The person who ended up dying was resuscitated, brought to St. John's Hospital in Jackson, and then was basically brain dead at that point. But our hospital does not have the capability of declaring someone brain dead, so the patient was then transferred to Idaho Falls, where he was declared brain dead. At the time, the police investigation was minimal at all, and they've apologized actually for that part. And the death initially was classified as a natural death related to actually alcohol intoxication. It was after the fact that we found out about the circumstances of the death, and when we tried to investigate it, and then that was in addition, by the way, to the police trying to investigate, the witnesses were reluctant to tell us exactly what had happened, and that's why we were required to hold an inquest and have people under oath in order to obtain at least partially truthful materials. There was quite a bit of conflict about what actually happened at the home, in the sense of one witness saying one thing and another witness saying another. And unfortunately, we did not have any ability to delineate who was being more truthful.
Representative Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Blue, county coroner mentioned to me that the one positive he saw with this legislation was that at least the people who would be evaluating a coroner's conduct would be people who have some experience and expertise in that domain. Do you see that as all beneficial to give the board this authority?
Dr. Blue.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I guess it depends on how you look at this. I mean, there are some coroners who are elected who are morticians, and that's all the experience they have for being a coroner. I'm a physician, and I'm not trying to really draw any major conclusions, but would I be held to a different standard than someone who's a mortician being a coroner? Or would that coroner who's a mortician be held to a higher standard because there's a coroner somewhere in the state that's a physician? I'm not sure how you resolve that problem. And I'm not sure how the way this legislation is written, this isn't just about evaluating how a coroner runs an inquest. It's how a coroner may run a investigation of a death. And that can get extremely difficult. I mean, coroners at this point have the sole ability to determine whether someone needs an autopsy or not. And that could be, a lot of families don't want an autopsy. And they could complain that the coroner was not acting properly in doing an autopsy. I mean, I just don't see how you can really evaluate this very well unless the conduct is so egregious that I think the governor would step in.
Well, and Dr. Blue, maybe that's kind of, I guess maybe that's kind of the point of the bill, is that if somebody feels that there was a wrong, they really, right now, their only avenue is to sue and end up in court. And so the point is to create a venue that can field those complaints in a less litigious way, that your board would be the one to decide, because you would be the one to create the reasonable standard of conduct for your industry, and then would be able to say, nope, kick that complaint out. Nope, not gonna, dismiss. And I just think of it like, if I were to compare it to my profession, for example, it doesn't stop me from being sued, but I think that the fact that someone can complain to the Bar Association about my conduct, it does probably limit the number of lawsuits in the state of Wyoming for malpractice against a lawyer, because that's the suggestion that comes over time. When someone calls a lawyer and says, I want to sue XYZ lawyer, the lawyer on the call probably says first, have you talked to the bar? Have you filed a complaint with the bar? And tries to steer them into that avenue. I think that's the idea here. Is I think the question is not whether it's workable or not, because ultimately it would be workable, right? Because I just gave the example of how my association does that. So there's clearly a process, whether it's big and expensive and time consuming to set up. Sure. I think the question, Dr. Blue, I would have for you is that a preferable path in the long run, that the complaint of misconduct be fielded by your board or association as opposed to a court? Or would you prefer that when it arises, that it go to the court?
Well, I mean, I think you can draw the same parallel to the medical review panel that the medical board has for litigation against physicians in this state. I think that a lot of times those boards get bypassed and they go right to court. I'm just not sure it makes any difference. I think this is the first case where anybody has filed suit in a setting like this. I'm just not sure it's necessary. Would I be violently opposed to it? No, I don't think there's any reason to be violently opposed to it, but I think it creates a tremendous amount of expense and difficulty. And I do think that some coroners would always be worried that somebody's, that they're going to question what they're doing and whether it's right on every case, and that could be of concern. I mean, right now the coroners are pretty independent.
Yeah, and Dr. Blue, that is the perfect parallel for this committee, because I have in my inbox a memorandum about the medical review panel for this committee to take up as a topic later, and that is the elimination of that medical review panel, which was suggested in the budget by the governor as a reduction, and the conclusion that it is unnecessary in the state of Wyoming and hasn't served us any good other than an administrative expense to the state. So if we were to draw that parallel, right now, the prevailing position, at least in thought budgetary wise, is to eliminate the medical review panel. So I appreciate that parallel. Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Dr. Blue, for being here. Can you explain to me what the benefit is of the inquest power as opposed to states where investigations happen without it?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm not sure what other states do. One of the things that the chairman alluded to was something called a medical examiner system, where the coroner is more of the certifier of a death, where the medical examiner is actually the investigator. The state of Kentucky, where I went to medical school, had a system that was basically a coroner system, and then it was converted to a medical examiner system, and that's worked out very well. We have looked at that in the state of Wyoming, and it was determined that that would be too expensive in order to have medical examiners, because you would basically have to have 3 to cover the entire state, and that would be a fair expense. The reason for having an inquest is mainly the ability to have people under oath with the risk of perjury if they do not tell the truth. And that's where that's the main purpose of the inquest. I mean, when it was established, when the state was first formed, literally the coroner could grab 3 people out of a crowd, make them jurors on the spot, and they would look at the body on the street and make a determination of whether this was a homicide or a suicide or a natural death or whatever. And so there is a little bit of sort of old Western law to this, but I think that having the independence of the coroner is a double-edged sword. I think it's been very valuable in the 6 years that I've been coroner, but I think other people could say it's been a bad thing.
Any other questions for the good doctor? Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Blue, I just had a question regarding the Board of Coroner Standards. Do you know who serves on that board? What's the makeup of that particular board?
I'm not sure about the exact makeup, but there are several coroners. There is I believe a lawyer, there's a sheriff involved, and I think there's 2 lay persons, but I'm not sure about the exact makeup.
So,
Representative Lorson, did you have that answer maybe? Is that what you wanted? Or did you have a tag-on question? There you go. Nope.
Okay, now maybe I'm there. I did have that up, and I think it's 1 physician, 3 coroners, a funeral home elected, or a funeral home director, a district attorney, and a peace officer.
Thank you.
That kind of gives you an idea.
Yep, thank you, Representative. Very helpful. Representative Craigo, you had a follow-up, and I cut you off.
well, I think my question got answered. I was just, I guess, was going to ask or point out that it's not physicians or coroners that are on that board, not necessarily people that are trained in doing your job.
Right, which goes back to my contemplation that I've had for years about the interesting quagmire of that statute not require, or statutes not requiring such a thing, even amongst our coroners. Representative Oakley.
I guess for discussion on that, so it is a physician and 3 coroners on the board. So, I mean, I don't know if I misunderstood that, along with a DA, a peace officer, and a funeral director. And I guess what I originally was just going to say, so we're looking at adding Romanet 8 to 74211 under subsection C. Subsection A and A1 is, there is created a board of coroner standards, and then A1, 2, 3, 4 explains the makeup of the board of coroners.
Okay. All right. So here's the deal, committee. The thing I have no discretion over is the 5:30 bewitching hour, which no matter what I do, my Zoom feed will end at 5:30. So because that is 6 minutes away, still a lot of time, in the legislating world. We can continue. Here's the thing: we can continue with public testimony with if we have any burning questions for the doctor, or the doctor wishes to provide any more testimony. Absolutely do not want to cut Dr. Blue off. We can do that. We can end public comment and go to the bill. And we can always just table. We can always table this and continue it for a later discussion. Ultimately, if the committee feels like if Dr. Blue doesn't have any other testimony and the committee feels like we have the testimony we need, then we can take action on the bill in our final minutes here if we desire. Representative Washit, what do you think?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank Dr. Blue for his testimony today. And I think there's a lot of issues here, and we've gotten by for many years in Wyoming without the coroner's board having this statutory authority. So it would be, I'd like to make a motion, if it's appropriate at this time, that we postpone this discussion of the bill indefinitely.
Okay, before you do that, Dr. Blue, I just want to make sure you don't have any additional testimony that you want to provide in public comment.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I really do not have any, but if you ever have any other questions, feel free to contact me anytime.
Thank you, Dr. Blue, for your testimony. So with that, I'll close public testimony and move to the bill. Now, committee, I suppose you, Representative Washit, you can move to postpone it indefinitely. You can just move the bill as well and second it, and we can just vote on the bill.
All right, move the bill.
Okay. And the second by Representative Larson. Burning discussion on the bill.
Question.
Sensing the body knows what they want to do, we'll go ahead and move to the vote on the bill. Ryan?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, you're voting on House Bill 31, Board of Coroner Standards Investigation Authority. Representative Crago?
No.
Representative Larson?
No.
Representative Oakley?
No.
Representative Provenza?
No.
Representative Rodriguez Williams?
No.
Representative Washit?
No.
Representative Yin?
No.
Representative Zwanitzer?
No.
And Chairman Olson?
No.
The bill fails. 9 no votes.
Thank you, Ryan. And committee, good job. Wrapping things up real quick in the final 2 minutes. First of all, awesome job. You unanimously moved to sponsor 3 bills and unanimously moved to kill a bill. So there's a great cohesion among the committee, which I really appreciate. I really appreciate all of this committee's thought that went in today, and a lot of discussion, a lot of action from this committee. And I'm already getting messages from outside of this committee saying, great job, guys, that you're really working the bills and you're working hard. And people see that and people know that beyond just people that are tuning in. So you're off to an amazing start. A few things that I will dispense with is just floor management of the bills. And I'm going to assign HB 42 to myself to floor manage. That's Chancery Court. I'm going to assign HB 43 youthful offender to Representative Oakley to floor manage. And I'm going to assign HB 35 theft statute amendments to Representative Provenza to floor manage. So Oakley and Representative Oakley and Provenza, I'll get with you and you can get with me on what that means when we go into session on the 27th. But that basically means you're going to present this bill to the committee of the whole. And we'll be there to help you, of course, but I think you'll do a great job. And with that, I was going to assign 31, but I don't have to now, Representative Yin. So with that, committee, any other comments before we close out the day? Awesome. Well, just once again, I'm really proud of the work that we did today, and really proud of each and every one of you that you jumped in and worked really hard. And I'm really looking forward to a session with this committee. So good job, committee. Get some rest. And if you have any questions or follow up, just let me know. Ryan, before I burn out my final seconds, is there anything from LSO that I need to know or that we need to know?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything more.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Mr. Fuller as well. Thank you to any LSO staff that helped with the day, and we'll see you at committee.
Thank you.